Chapter 480. Let's go. With the opening of the illusory formation, no one hesitated and rushed inside. Master Daoist Yuanmu was also relieved. He turned around and sent a sound-transmitting talisman to Master Iron Mask and Scholar Yu in the distance. As soon as she entered the illusory formation, Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows in surprise. This storehouse was actually an ice cave. The whole space was irregular and filled with glittering ice cubes. There was no trace of human construction. Just as everyone finished looking around, Scholar Yu and Master Iron Mask came in awkwardly. Mo Tiange turned to look at the opening of the illusory formation. In midair, the refined corpse was devouring the illusionary talismans left by Scholar Yu. When it finished devouring, it suddenly lost its two targets. It wandered around in a daze before finally wandering away. She felt relieved. This illusory formation was really powerful. Even with such a small opening, their breaths didn't leak out. Dead things like the refined corpse couldn't be distinguished at all. Mr. Yu, thank you for your hard work, Master Daoist Yuanmu said politely when he saw Scholar Yu. Scholar Yu said with a pale face, since I accepted fellow Daoist Yuanmu's things, I naturally have to do it. Then, he said reluctantly, I didn't accept fellow Daoist Yuanmu's token for nothing. I lost a lot to lure that refined corpse away. Mo Tiange thought about the illusionary talisman Scholar Yu threw out. Each one cost tens of thousands of spirit stones. He fought with the refined corpse for a long time, so he must have lost hundreds of thousands of spirit stones. Although hundreds of thousands of spirit stones weren't unbearable for late nascent soul cultivators, how could the talismans used by late nascent soul cultivators be ordinary? They probably couldn't buy them even if they wanted to. Then, everyone's attention returned to the storehouse. After walking along the ice cave for a while, they finally arrived in front of a stone door. This stone door was painted with strange golden patterns, which emitted a strong momentum and made it difficult to approach. This should be the defensive restriction of the storehouse. Sensing the unfathomable power of the restriction, Master Daoist Yuanmu sighed, such a restriction. No wonder little friend Mo said it's impossible. Based on his knowledge, this restriction was definitely beyond the deification realm. It seemed this great ancient sect had high-level cultivators beyond the deification realm. However, the sect might have declined after the war between the righteous and devil path, so the elders were only in the deification realm. Everyone looked around and found that there was a small depression in the middle of the patterns, which matched the size of their tokens. Master Daoist Yuanmu glanced around and found that there was a small depression in the size of the token. Reverend Yuanmu swept a glance at her and said indifferently, of course. In front of so many people, he didn't have the face to do something that would ruin his own identity. Daoist Yuanmu Dao, Jr. will be. And Junior will. After saying those words, he took a step forward and took out his token, intending to place it in the recess of the stone door. Wait. Qin Shi pulled her back and whispered, I'll go first, S. Master of Qi said. You. Demon. Due to the limitations of her cultivation, there were many things she could only stand at the back. If she wanted to get out of this situation, she had to form her nascent soul as soon as possible. Qin Shi took out the storeroom's identity tablet from his Qiankuan bag and gently placed it in the recess on the stone door. The restriction on the stone door flashed with a white light, covering the identity tablet. The identity tablet also shone with a white light, which shone together with the restriction on the stone door. Then, with a flash of white light, the token fell to the ground, and the stone door silently opened. Qin Shi took the token, looked around, and cautiously took the first step. The restriction on the stone door didn't respond. After a moment of hesitation, Qin Shi stepped inside. He turned around and was about to say something, but the stone door was closed. When everyone saw him enter safely, they were relieved. This proved the King Dragon token was indeed effective. Their time today wasn't wasted. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange did the same thing. Little friend Mo. Scholar Yu suddenly said. Mo Tiange paused and asked nervously, Mr. Yu, what can I do for you? Scholar Yu shook his head and said, although we've made an agreement, you can't keep staying here and waste everyone's time. How about 1 hour? If you don't come out in 1 hour, we'll go in. Mo Tiange didn't answer immediately. Such a big sect had a huge storehouse. It wasn't easy to understand all the treasures in 1 hour and make a decision. But what Scholar Yu said wasn't unreasonable. Although they agreed to let her enter the storehouse first, they couldn't ignore their own interests and let them waste their time. She glanced at Master Daoist Yuanmu and the others. They didn't say anything, which meant they tacitly agreed to Scholar Yu's proposal. She hesitated for a moment but eventually nodded. Okay. She'd already obtained the right to enter the storehouse first. If she still had any objections, these late nascent soul cultivators would most likely have objections. Seeing that she was sensible, Scholar Yu smiled and waved the folding fan in his hand. Please. Mo Tiange turned around, put away the token, and entered the storehouse. Jing Xingji was next. The stone door behind them closed silently, and the three of them met in the storehouse. It's so big. Jing Xingji looked around in surprise. This storehouse was also a huge ice cave, almost bottomless. Countless treasures floated in the air, emitting a bright light. These treasures were surrounded by spiritual aura and glinted faintly. They should be defensive restrictions that could only be opened by the tokens in their hands. These treasures didn't need to be examined carefully. With one glance, they could see that they were definitely existences that surpassed the current cultivation world. After Jing Xingji joined them, although he'd been pretending to be invisible, he could already see what was going on with his shrewdness. He'd long guessed that they'd found an absolutely amazing fated chance with these late nascent soul cultivators, but he still didn't expect it to be such a magnificent scene. Any one of these items would cause a sensation in the world of cultivators. Fellow Daoist Jing. Mo Tiange looked at him with a smile. Jing Xingji curled his lips, threw the token back to her, and muttered, Are you afraid I'll go back on my word? That's hard to say, Mo Tiange said bluntly. Do you dare say you're not tempted when you look at these things? Jing Xingji rolled his eyes helplessly, but he couldn't say anything to refute her. How could he not be tempted? In fact, when he saw these things, an idea indeed emerged in his mind. He wanted to take the token for himself. He'd been in the cultivation world for almost 300 years. He'd been to many secret places and seen even more treasures. However, only the spiritual treasures he and Qin Shi obtained when they first met could compare to the things in front of him. Fortunately, he was still rational. Not to mention that he couldn't defeat Qin Shi. Even if he could, there were still so many late nascent soul cultivators outside. Without enough strength, how could he leave safely? 1 hour. Hurry up. Since he had no fate with them, he simply found a corner to sit cross-legged and regulate his breath, no longer paying attention to them. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi glanced at each other. Without wasting any time, the two of them quickly began to look for treasures. 7 treasures: Heart-gathering lotus, Immortal slaying soul-destroying sword, Nephrite holy spirit, Diamond cold iron, Great heavenly thunder spell. These treasures were too much for the two of them to take in. The treasures floating in the air were all distant past-era spiritual treasures that couldn't be found in the current cultivation world. Senior Martial Brother. More than half an hour passed in the blink of an eye, but the two of them still hadn't finished looking at the treasures in the storeroom. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then called Qin Shi. There's only a quarter of an hour left. We can't finish looking at them. Let's make a decision quickly. Looking at the countless treasures in front of them, Qin Shi sighed regretfully and nodded. And there's not much time. It's impossible to finish looking at them. Then tell me, what should we choose? She thought for a moment then said, although you have a lot of magic weapons, you lack powerful attacking methods. It'd be better to choose this great heavenly thunder technique. Mo Tiange looked at the side of this great heavenly thunder technique. There was a simple introduction. Thunder spells can be practiced by people with metal spiritual roots. Those with thunder spiritual roots will have the best effects. When practiced to the highest realm, the power can be comparable to heavenly thunder. Heavenly thunder. This was the most powerful spell in the cultivation world. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment. What she said was right. Most of her magic weapons had strange uses, but they weren't very powerful. Her natal magic weapon, the Heaven and Earth Fan, wasn't good at attacking. Sometimes, she also needed a thunderous strike. The fact that this great heavenly thunder technique was placed in the storeroom instead of the scripture pavilion showed that it was a peerless cultivation technique. Thunder spells were famous for their power. She had all 5 elements spiritual roots. Although the thunder spells she practiced weren't as good as those with pure thunder spiritual roots, with the help of medicinal pills, it shouldn't be a problem. Then the second one, you guys go to the back. A voice suddenly sounded in her mind. Mo Tiange was startled, but she soon said happily, Master, have you rested enough? Fu Yaozi said faintly, there's a book at the back of the storeroom. We must get it. Tiange. She called out when he saw that she suddenly became silent. Mo Tiange didn't explain. She pulled his hand and walked in the direction Fu Yaozi pointed. Let's go. After entering the Immortal Palace, this kind of situation was very common. She was already used to it, so he didn't ask anything and just followed her to the back. The third spiritual treasure from the back was a book. There was a line of golden ancient characters on the animal skin cover, Jade Bone Puppet Technique. There was an introduction next to it, using jade bones as the frame and Nephrite Holy Spirit as the body, it can be made into a puppet. The highest realm the puppet can reach is the deification realm. Although the introduction was simple, the two of them couldn't help but gasp. A deification realm puppet. If it was made, wouldn't it run amok in the human world? The word jade bone immediately reminded them of the crystal skeleton they got from the ancient cultivator's cave. Mo Tiange asked, Master, did you ask me to put away the skeleton for this? Fu Yaozi smiled and said, I saw you were very interested in the art of engineering, so I thought you'd also be interested in this. But she was a bit hesitant. Can this jade bone puppet really be made? The materials needed must be very precious, right? So, it depends on whether you're willing to gamble or not, Fu Yaozi said faintly. Jade bones as the frame and Nephrite Holy Spirit as the body. There's also Nephrite Holy Spirit in this storeroom. If you want this puppet technique, you must take the Nephrite Holy Spirit as the third item. As for the other materials, I haven't read this book, so I don't know if I can collect them all. It's up to you. What's wrong? She asked. Mo Tiange sighed and relayed Fu Yaozi's words to him. In the end, she said, we only have 2 chances. If we want this puppet technique, we must take the Nephrite Holy Spirit as the third item. However, we don't know whether it can be made into a puppet or not. This was a gamble. If they won, they'd get a puppet with outstanding strength, but if they lost, they'd wasted 2 chances in vain. Chapter 481. Let's do it. She said when the hour was almost up. Mo Tiange glanced at him. Seeing his determined expression, she also felt like staking everything on one throw. Let's do it. Aren't they just 2 supreme spiritual treasures? Even if they don't have them, they still have to advance to the deification realm. With that thought, she took out the token, erased the restriction on the jade bone puppet technique, put the book away, and took out the Holy Spirit Nephrite. After putting away the things, the two of them looked at each other and couldn't help but sigh. Seeing each other sigh, they smiled at each other. Although they made up their minds to bet, they were still a bit nervous about the outcome. After all, the price was too high. "Let's go. Chin," she said, "let's leave quickly while they come in to choose the treasures." And Mo Tiange also thought so. The others entered the storehouse. This many treasures were enough to buy them some time. They had to leave far away during this time. Otherwise, it would be really unsafe to stay with a group of people who were stronger than them. "Wait!" Fu Yaozi's voice rang in their minds again. "The hour is up." Outside the storehouse, Scholar Yu knocked the folding fan in his hand and looked at the others. "Fellow Taoists, shall we go in now?" Master Taoist Yuanmu and the others were resting with their eyes closed. When they heard this, they opened their eyes, which shone brightly. Venerable Avidya also smiled and looked at the stone door. Then, these late-stage nascent cultivators opened the stone door one by one and went inside in a line. When they entered the storehouse, the light of the spiritual treasures dazzled everyone's eyes. Even though they were the top nascent late-stage cultivators in the mortal realm and had seen countless spiritual treasures, they still felt their hearts palpitate in the face of these innumerable treasures that surpassed the realm of nascent soul. Even someone as cunning as Reverend Yuan Mu could not restrain his greed. Needless to say, as long as they had a few spiritual treasures here, they could laugh proudly in the human world. After exclaiming, Scholar Yu looked at Master Taoist Yuanmu warily and then glanced at Venerable Avidya. Venerable Avidya looked calm, but he suddenly opened his eyes and smiled at him. This smile set Scholar Yu's heart at ease. These treasures that were far beyond the current level of the immortal cultivation world were indeed hot-headed. If Julian's sect relied on their own strength to snatch the token by force, he was not confident that he could escape unscathed. However, if he had the support of Reverend Wu Ming, things would be different. Julian's sect had 2 late-stage nascent soul cultivators and 1 mid-stage nascent soul cultivator. Among them, Ling Shiyu was injured and did not have much combat strength. If the Buddhist and Confucian duo joined forces, they would have 2 late-stage nascent soul cultivators, which was enough to contend against Julian's sect. At this time, Reverend Yuan Mu's gaze also swept over the 2 of them. In the end, he wisely put away the greed in his eyes and said to them with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, there are so many treasures here, we don't have to be polite. Let's hurry." The 3 of them nodded and smiled. Then, they led their juniors to look through the treasures in the treasury. At this moment, Ling Yunhe, who was following beside spiritual master Yuanmu, looked around and suddenly said, "Martial Uncle Yuanmu, where are the 3 of them?" Perfected Yuanmu was slightly taken aback before his expression changed. When Scholar Yu and revered Wu Ming heard this, they turned around as well. Although the storeroom was huge and had layers of restrictions, they were all late nascent soul cultivators, so they could sense whether or not someone was inside. Aside from them, there was no one else here. Where did Mo Tiange and the other 2 go in the end? They were always outside the storeroom, but they didn't see them come out at all. "Mr. Yu." Master Yuanmu looked at Scholar Yu. Scholar Yu muttered to himself, "How's this possible?" It was impossible for a big cultivation group storeroom to have other exits. They also didn't find any other exits, so how could those 3 people disappear into thin air? The restrictions inside the storeroom weren't to be trifled with. Without needing to be told, Ling Yunhe, Han Shiji, and Zhu Wu began to run around. Although the storeroom was big, with the 3 of them working together, it didn't take them long to turn it upside down. They didn't find anything unusual at all. The 5 nascent soul cultivators' expressions became even more grave. The situation before their eyes was completely beyond their expectations. It even made them temporarily forget that the whole storeroom was filled with spiritual treasures. The gap between realms was insurmountable. Even nascent soul cultivators like them felt the restrictions inside the storeroom were unfathomable. They were sure they were ancient restrictions that surpassed the deification realm. Surrounded by such restrictions, it was impossible for them to ignore the restrictions and leave the storeroom. In that case, where did they go in the end? Was there another passage inside the storeroom, or? Scholar Yu looked at Master Yuanmu and saw the same vigilance in his eyes. He knew that the two of them were thinking the same thing. His expression didn't change as he sent a voice transmission through his divine sense. Fellow Taoist Yuanmu, are you thinking that they're still inside the storeroom? Master Yuanmu nodded slightly and replied, that's right. If they obtained some ancient spiritual treasure that can conceal their aura, at this point, the two of them looked a little gloomy. If that was the case, the three of them definitely harbored evil intentions towards them. This old monk thinks that the two of you are worrying too much, revered Wu Ming suddenly said. Scholar Yu and Master Yuanmu's voice transmission could not be heard by others, but with revered Wu Ming's cultivation, it was not a problem. Seeing that revered Wu Ming had directly spoken, Scholar Yu looked around with some apprehension before saying, oh. What do you think, fellow Taoist Wu Ming? Revered Wu Ming said with a smile, among the three of them, one is mid-stage nascent soul, one is early-stage nascent soul, and one has yet to form his nascent soul. What means do they have to kill all of us without being able to resist? Under normal circumstances, of course it's impossible, Master Yuanmu said with a heavy voice. However, the three of them entered the storeroom earlier than us, so it's very likely that they obtained some kind of spiritual treasure. If they relied on spiritual treasures, they wouldn't be able to do it unless those treasures could erupt with formidable power in an instant. Revered Wu Ming said slowly, neither hurriedly nor slowly, this place is the important storeroom of this distant past great cultivation group. It's heavily guarded. The storeroom was an important place and heavily guarded. It absolutely wouldn't allow others to use magic weapons and spells at will. This was a common principle among every cultivation group. Otherwise, if other treasures were destroyed, the foundation of a cultivation group would be damaged. Master Yuanmu's and Scholar Yu's expressions slowly eased. If that was the case, no matter what method the three of them used to disappear inside the storeroom, they didn't need to pay attention to them anymore. However, they inevitably felt it was a pity that the three of them took away some kind of spiritual treasure. At this time, the three of them were in the middle of a fierce battle. In the dark stone room, cultivators could only see several dozen feet ahead, but countless malicious devils were surging towards them. The three of them stood back to back, each relying on their magic weapons to fight the devils. I say, fellow Taoist Qingwei. Although Jing Xingji had advanced into the nascent soul realm, he still habitually addressed Mo Tiange as his peer. It was unknown whether it was because of Qin Shi or because Mo Tiange was about to advance. What the hell is this place? How can there be so many devils? I don't know what's going on either. Mo Tiange frowned. With two nascent soul cultivators by her side, they shared most of the devils, so she didn't feel much pressure. Maybe it's been too long. When they were about to leave the storeroom, Fu Yaozi stopped her and told her there was a passage in the storeroom that led directly to the underground palace, which was the Vermilion Bird sacrificial temple. Mo Tiange was overjoyed when she heard this news. She was worried she couldn't leave safely after obtaining the treasures. If that was the case, there was no need to meet Master Yuanmu and the others. Therefore, the three of them went directly to the underground palace from the storeroom. They planned to explore the underground palace first and then leave the palace through other exits. But what they didn't expect was that not long after they went down to the underground palace, they found that the primordial devil aura inside was seriously leaking and even attracted a group of devils. Some of these devils were refined corpses, and some were demonized demonic beasts. Although their cultivation levels weren't very high, they were very difficult to deal with. Thinking up to this point, Tiange couldn't help but ask, Master, letting me leave through this secret passage was something you planned long ago, wasn't it? At that time, I was alone. If I encountered these devils after coming down, how could I leave safely? Fu Yaozi paused for a moment then answered with a bitter smile, this was indeed my fault. When I went down to the underground palace, these devils weren't there, so, Master, you never thought that after 100,000 years, this place would become unsafe. If I really came down here alone, it would be fate for me to die here. Fu Yaozi didn't answer, which could be considered as a tacit agreement. Tiange secretly rolled her eyes. Fortunately, she was lucky. She met her at the entrance, and before that, she also ran into Jing Xingji. With the two nascent soul cultivators by his side, although these devils were difficult to deal with, they weren't a problem. They killed their way out of the stone room, killed their way through several passages, and finally killed all these devils. The three of them heaved sighs of relief then found a safe place to sit cross-legged and adjust their breaths. Fellow Daoist Qingwei, what's going on? Shouldn't you tell me? Jing Xingji asked as he closed his eyes to adjust his breath. The matter of the Vermilion Bird Sacrificial Temple was indeed complicated. I didn't get any benefits from cooperating with you, but I had to fight here. You still won't tell me clearly, this is too unfair. What do you mean you didn't get any benefits? She said with a snort, at least you escaped the pursuit of that deification refined corpse. Do you want me to settle the account with you first? This time, Jing Xingji couldn't say anything. When he was chased by that refined corpse, if she didn't turn around and put a spiritual talisman to stop it, it would be hard to say whether he could escape or not. In fact, it might not have saved his whole life, but at least half of it was saved. Looking at Jing Xingji's speechless appearance, Tiange suddenly felt a bit sorry for him. In fact, Jing Xingji was really unlucky. He used to be the brilliant disciple of Venerable Swordsman, a nascent soul cultivator of Gujin sect. He was talented and had an extraordinary status. Unexpectedly, his master died and he lost his backer. He was suppressed by his master's enemies everywhere, and his status plummeted. Later, he cultivated to the late stage of the core formation realm by relying on his wisdom and temperament. If he could enter the nascent soul realm in one fell swoop, it would be considered a success. However, he was schemed against by Master Song Feng on Demonic Mountain with her. Not only did he not get any fated chances, but he also completely fell out with Gujin sect's ruling faction on the way back and was seriously injured. Because of his injuries, he couldn't even go back to his sect, so he had to find another place to go. He left the celestial pole and became an individual cultivator. From a proud son of heaven to a wandering individual cultivator, people couldn't help but shed tears of sympathy for him. This was fine, after all, everyone had bad times. But the problem was, with Shi next to him, he looked extremely pitiful. The two of them were actually very similar. They were both brilliant disciples of nascent soul cultivators from famous cultivation groups, and they were both young and had high cultivation levels. In terms of aptitude, Shi definitely wasn't better than him. In terms of status, the two of them were originally about the same, but their encounters were really as different as heaven and earth. When he left the celestial pole in a sorry state, Shi had formed his nascent soul with boundless glory and became the Grand Supreme Elder of Xianqing School. Now, when they reunited in a foreign land, he was once again suppressed by Shi. If she were Jing Xingji, she would definitely sigh. The existence of a Shi in this world was simply the heavens deliberately trying to disgust him. Chapter 482. Tiange had told Shi about her conjecture about the sacrificial temple in detail. Seeing that Shi didn't seem to have any objections, she said to Jing Xingji, according to our conjecture, this place should be a relic from the distant past era. Distant past. Jing Xingji opened his eyes with a solemn expression. Are you sure it's the distant past era? I told you, it's just a conjecture. Mo Tiange was very calm. This place might be worshipping Vermilion Bird, one of the 5 spirits from the distant past era. We need to verify whether it's true or not. Vermilion Bird. Jing Xingji muttered. Mo Tiange looked at him and added, in addition, there's also a primordial devil steel here, which is the source of the devil aura. Then what should we do? Mo Tiange smiled and said, first, find that primordial devil steel and take it with us if possible. Second, I won't hide it from fellow Daoist Jing. This sacrificial temple doesn't only worship the 5 spirits, but it also has the remains of the real 5 spirits. What? Jing Xingji cried out involuntarily. The 5 spirits were the legendary spiritual beings, the symbols of the gods in the distant past era, and the creatures closest to the gods before humans started cultivating. They were born with supernatural abilities, powerful and holy. They could fly to heaven and enter the earth, and only gods could control them. He learned about these things from ancient books when he stepped on the path of immortality, but he never thought he could see the remains of the 5 spirits with his own eyes. That was an era too far away from the present. Fellow Daoist Jing, you didn't lose anything this time, right? Mo Tiange asked with a smile. Jing Xingji calmed down a bit and said, if that's the case, I owe you a favor. A relic from the distant past era worshipping the remains of the Vermilion Bird. Not to mention whether he could get any fated chances from it, just bringing him here was a great favor. After thinking for a while, Jing Xingji sighed and said, what's the origin of this great ancient sect? They actually built their immortal palace on the sacrificial temple of the distant past era. This sect must have been extremely prosperous in the beginning, but unfortunately, it couldn't escape the laws of heaven and earth, Qin Shi said flatly, still adjusting his breath with his eyes closed. Yes, the laws of heaven and earth. Jing Xingji sighed. Such a great sect was unexpectedly torn into an independent space and destroyed overnight. The more I cultivate, the more I feel that the power of heaven and earth is truly terrifying. The more you know, the more fearful you will be. Only the ignorant can be fearless. Qin Shi chuckled. He opened his eyes and said, if that wasn't the case, why would we cultivate in the first place? We are all mortals who want to escape the power of heaven and earth and dream of immortality. Unfortunately, no one knows if we can reach the end of this path. In the primeval age, there were many legends about ascending to the immortal realm. In the primeval age, there were people who cultivated to the Mahayana stage and faced the tribulations. But now, even the soul formation stage had become a legend. Thinking of this, the 3 of them each had their own experiences, and for a moment, they were silent. After a while, Mo Tiange said, have you all rested well? We should continue. There's not much time left. There's only one last day. Upon hearing this, Qin Shi and Jing Xingji stopped to adjust their breaths and stood up to prepare. Following the dim stone path, the 3 slowly moved forward. This Vermilion Bird sacrificial temple was similar to the Azure Dragon sacrificial temple Mo Tiange visited, but it was also different. The material used to build this temple was a kind of fiery red stone, which carried the aura of the fire essence. Qin Shi guessed that these stones must have been taken from a place where the fire essence was extremely strong. After accumulating for many years, they carried the aura of the fire essence. If they were here today, they would be excellent materials for refining fire attribute magic weapons. However, they didn't plan to demolish the temple because that would be too disrespectful to the Vermilion Bird worshipped here. Cultivators like them didn't respect ghosts or gods, and they didn't fear the world, but deep in their hearts, they still had some taboos. After walking for a while, they encountered another group of demonic creatures. In this sacrificial temple, there was a serious leakage of devil aura, and there were a lot of demonic creatures. Unfortunately, these demonic creatures were useless to cultivators like them, so they could only abandon them after killing them. If there were devil cultivators here, they would definitely be overjoyed. Mo Tiange thought of Yang Qingji. When they broke the illusory formation in the storeroom, he still hadn't appeared. Did the master and disciple really die here? She found it hard to believe, but in this immortal palace, anything could happen. Even if Guifang Devil Monarch's cultivation level was in the late nascent soul stage, he couldn't guarantee anything. Oh! After killing another group of demonic creatures and bypassing a mass of devil aura, Qin Shi, who was walking in the front, suddenly stopped. What's wrong? This aura. The one who spoke was Jing Xingji. He had already advanced into the nascent soul realm, so his senses were sharper than Mo Tiange's. Qin Shi didn't answer and continued to walk forward. Mo Tiange followed closely behind him. After a while, she indeed felt something unusual. Without the devil aura obstructing them, she could clearly feel an aura pervading the surroundings. It was blazing and sacred, vast and pure, carrying an ancient and boundless aura. This aura was somewhat similar to the azure dragon's breath she felt before, but it was also different. The azure dragon's breath was restrained and tranquil, as if they were in a boundless forest, inclusive and full of vitality. This kind of aura, however, carried a passion and exuberant vitality that could burn everything. The vermilion bird's breath, she whispered. It should be. Let's go. Qin Shi sped up. The three of them were practically running on the stone path. Finally, when they reached the end of the stone path, their eyes suddenly opened up. This was a hall with a tall and heavy stone door engraved with a fiery red totem. Inside the hall stood huge stone pillars, all of which were painted with fiery red patterns. As they slowly walked inside, a towering stone statue gradually appeared in front of them. Its wings were spread open, its head held high, and it carried an aura that could burn everything. One of the 5 spirits, the vermilion bird. The three of them didn't say anything for a long time and just stared blankly. They were all high-level cultivators, so the pressure from the vermilion bird's breath wasn't strong enough to frighten them, but the boundless aura from the distant past era shocked them. Mo Tiange was the first to return to her senses. She had seen the azure dragon statue before, so she wasn't too shocked when she saw the vermilion bird statue. Look, what's that? Upon hearing her voice, Qin Shi and Jing Xingji looked in the direction she was pointing and were both stunned. They saw a bow and arrows on the altar in front of the statue. The bow had a golden body and a fiery red bowstring. Its power was astonishing. This is, Jing Xingji was the first to exclaim. This bow and arrow had a strong vermilion bird's aura. As long as they got a little closer, they would feel like they were being burned. This thing definitely wasn't a magic weapon that could be refined in the current cultivation world. Even those amazing distant past-era spiritual treasures in the storehouse couldn't compare to its power. The vermilion bird bow. We meet again. Fu Yao's sigh resounded in Mo Tiange's mind. Master, what's going on? This vermilion bird bow is a supreme spiritual treasure refined by the top cultivator of the distant past era's ice palace using the remains of the vermilion bird in the sacrificial temple. It's also the sect's cornerstone treasure. Fu Yao said. Unfortunately, the disciples recruited by the ice palace all had water attribute spiritual roots and specialized in ice attribute cultivation techniques. Later on, the sect declined and no one could use this bow. This bow was enshrined in the underground palace, never to see the light of day. Mo Tiange was speechless. A sect famous for its ice attribute cultivation techniques actually refined such a supreme fire attribute spiritual treasure as the sect's cornerstone treasure. She really didn't know what to say. But even if it was someone else, a sect built on the Vermilion Bird's sacrificial temple couldn't ignore the Vermilion Bird's divine power, right? Moreover, there were many talented cultivators in the distant past era. As far as she knew, there was a cultivation technique called the ice and fire technique. If one practiced this technique, using this bow wouldn't be a problem. Master, did you want us to come here to take this treasure? Ha! Fuyao chuckled and said, if this treasure could be taken away, why would the 5 of us keep it back then? To tell you the truth, the Vermilion Bird's divine power on this treasure isn't something we can control, so of course we can't take it away. Back then, we all tried, but none of us could resist the Vermilion Bird's breath. If we tried to resist it by force, we would get injured, so we could only give up in the end. Hearing this, Emotinga felt as if she was splashed with a bucket of cold water. But thinking about it, if they could take it away, they would have taken it a long time ago. Then why did we come here? Sensing her gloomy mood, Fuyao smiled. Isn't the Vermilion Bird's breath inside a treasure? I know you've had extraordinary encounters, so don't be too greedy. You obtained the Azure Dragon's bone long ago, so you already have the Azure Dragon's breath. Now that you've obtained the Vermilion Bird's breath and advanced to the nascent soul realm, you can create your own divine ability. Think about it. If you can refine the Azure Dragon's breath and the Vermilion Bird's breath and create your own divine ability, wouldn't that be terrifying? Just as they were talking, Emotinga saw Jing Xingji taking a step forward, so she hastily called out, fellow Daoist Jing. Jing Xingji turned his head and looked at her. What's wrong? Emotinga said, the power of this thing is amazing. I'm afraid we can't take it away. Upon hearing what she said, Qin Shi, whose eyes were blazing, turned his head. What's going on? Emotinga sighed and relayed Fuyao's words to them. She then said, this treasure should have been refined by a cultivator whose realm far surpassed ours, so its power is amazing. However, the Vermilion Bird's divine power it carries is too powerful. It's not something we can control at our realm. Spirit summoning magic weapon. Qin Shi murmured. It was said in the cultivation world that the top-grade spiritual treasures had their own spirituality and were called spirit-summoning magic weapons. The power of such spirit-summoning magic weapons couldn't be compared to ordinary magic weapons. However, this kind of spirit-summoning magic weapon had long been lost. Even in the storehouse of this great ancient cultivation group, only a few spirit-summoning magic weapons could be found. In the past, spirit-summoning magic weapons only existed in legends. They never thought they'd be able to see one with their own eyes. No. Jing Xingji said resolutely, no matter what, I have to give it a try. The spirit-summoning magic weapon is right in front of me, but I don't even try. I'm afraid I won't be reconciled for the rest of my life. Emotinga looked at Qin Shi and saw that his eyes were also filled with determination. She shook her head and said, I understand your feelings. For us cultivators, spirit-summoning magic weapons are extremely tempting. I'll go get it first. Jing Xingji turned his head and said to them, if I'm injured by the Vermilion Bird's divine power, I won't blame you even if you leave me here. Once he finished speaking, he no longer said anything. He took a step forward and reached his hand towards the Vermilion Bird bow on the altar. Buzz! A soft sound rang out. Before he could even touch it, the Vermilion Bird bow burst into flames. Chapter 483. Before he could even grasp the Vermilion Bird bow, Jing Xingji cried out in pain as he was flung away. The flames on the Vermilion Bird bow had returned to their original state, burning steadily and fiercely. Daoist Jing. Jing Xingji half sat on the ground and lowered his head to look at his hands. His expression was cloudy and uncertain. The hand he had used to grab the Vermilion Bird bow was already charred black. Emotinga and Qin Shi glanced at each other. Both of them were a bit aghast. When a cultivator forms their nascent soul, their body will also be reconstructed. The body of a nascent soul cultivator is much stronger than that of a core formation cultivator. It is very difficult for ordinary magic treasures to injure them. Jing Xingji was a sword cultivator, and sword cultivators usually practiced body tempering techniques at the same time. Therefore, his body was naturally tougher than that of ordinary nascent soul cultivators. However, this vermilion bird bough relied solely on the flames on its surface to seriously injure Jing Xingji. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed it. What a powerful force! After a long while, Jing Xingji regained his wits. He swallowed a medicinal pill and cast a simple healing spell on his wound before standing up again. As he stared at the vermilion bird bough on the offering table, the fervor in his eyes faded a little. He then turned towards Qin Shi and said, "It seems fellow Daoist Qingwei was right. The power of this treasure is astonishing, far surpassing our realms. Without special means, we can't take it away." Qin Shi naturally believed what Mo Tiange said. Besides, Jing Xingji's experience was right before his eyes. However, he looked at the vermilion bird bough in front of him and hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. "Senior Marshal Brother," Mo Tiange called. He turned around and saw her worried expression. He revealed a comforting smile. "I'm just trying. If it doesn't work, I won't force it." Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment before nodding. "You must be careful." She knew that although Qin Shi was a cultivator with a firm Dao heart like her, they were different in some aspects. When she was growing up, she experienced too many losses. After the inner demon's test during the core formation realm, she became indifferent to everything in the world. She focused on her state of mind and looked down on external objects. As for Qin Shi, just like all male cultivators, he also pursued power while pursuing the path to immortality. He never slacked off on refining the three-yang real fire sword. He tirelessly searched for secret techniques to make himself stronger. Perhaps this was also a difference between men and women. Female cultivators with a firm Dao heart rarely liked to kill. Instead, they wholeheartedly focused on the Dao. Male cultivators, on the other hand, could not avoid the desire for power. This wasn't absolute, but it was mostly so. For all cultivators who pursued power, it would be a lifelong regret to give up on a spiritual treasure that was rarely seen even in ancient times without even trying it out. Qin Shi took a deep breath and took a step forward. He stood in front of the altar and reached out his hand. A blue flame sprang out of his arm. It was his secret technique, the extreme yang real fire. The true fire in the cultivation world is divided into external fire and internal fire. The external fire is the three great true fires, and the internal fire is the true fire in a cultivator's dantian. In the nascent soul realm, even a cultivator who didn't practice fire techniques would have a very powerful nascent soul real fire. Moreover, Qin Shi had been proficient in fire element spells ever since he started aura refining. Yang real stage cultivators is yang real his fire. Yang real formation cultivators bird formation cultivators fire spirit, and the spirit. However, even so, as soon as he got close to the vermilion bird bough, his extreme yang true fire started to flicker, as if it was extremely afraid. Mo Tiange's face darkened. She stared at his movements without blinking. Qin Shi controlled the yang real fire to surround his arm and slowly approached the vermilion bird bough. 1 foot, half a foot, 3 inches, 1 inch. Just as his hand was about to hold the vermilion bird bough, the flame on the bowstring exploded again, and a wave of air surged. Qin Shi retreated quickly. He waved his other hand, and the 3-yang real fire sword appeared in front of him. At the same time, Mo Tiange threw out her white silk handkerchief, which turned into a thick mist to block the wave of air. Plop, plop. The two of them were thrown to the ground at the same time. Tiange. Protected by the yang real fire and retreating in time, Qin only felt the spiritual aura in his body surge, but he wasn't injured. Seeing Mo Tiange being thrown far away, he hurried to help her up. Cough. Mo Tiange's face was pale, and the spiritual aura in her body was chaotic. Qin immediately took out a 9 transformations yang restoration pill and gave it to her. He frowned and said, "Your cultivation level isn't high enough. Why are you trying to be brave? Even Jing Xingji couldn't bear that power. Aren't you just asking for trouble?" Before Mo Tiange could answer, Jing Xingji, who was on the side, muttered, "Just say it, why did you mention me?" Seeing that Qin also couldn't take the vermilion bird bow away, his mood was a bit complicated. He was happy but also a bit depressed. He was happy because he couldn't take this kind of spiritual channeling magic weapon. If someone else took it in front of him, wouldn't he feel sad? He was depressed because Qin cultivated a fire element cultivation technique and his cultivation level was higher than Jing Xingji's, but he still couldn't take this bow. Could it be that they could only return empty-handed after entering a treasure mountain like the 5 saints? After taking the medicinal pill, Mo Tiange looked a bit better. She smiled and said, "I didn't think too much." Qin wanted to say something, but he couldn't bear to see her like this, so he said, "Let's take a rest first." Mo Tiange was about to answer, but she suddenly saw their expressions change. "What's wrong?" "Someone's coming." Qin said. 3 people. They've already discovered us. Jing Xingji looked solemn. Regardless of the injuries on his hands, he shook his arm, and the sharp sword on his back was unsheathed. It turned into sword light and protected his body. 2 late-stage nascent soul cultivators, Qin said in a low voice. "I'm afraid it's them." Mo Tiange's expression froze. 2 late-stage nascent soul cultivators. Are they from Juyin sect? 3 people. Who's the last one? Was Ling Yunhe left up there? Or was it Ling Xiyu? Before the 3 of them could figure it out, the breaths outside were getting closer and closer. Soon, 3 people rushed into the hall. In this vermilion bird sacrificial temple, the leakage of primordial devil aura was severe, so they couldn't use their divine senses well. Therefore, when they sensed someone approaching, it was already too late to dodge. "Sure enough, it's you guys," the newcomers shouted in a deep voice. They were Master Daoist Yuanmu, Master Daoist Iron Mask, and Ling Yunhe. "Fellow Daoist Yuanmu, we've only been apart for a few hours, but we meet again." After a moment of surprise, Qin calmly greeted him with a calm expression. Master Daoist Yuanmu's sharp gaze moved back and forth between the 3 of them. In the end, his gaze stopped on the sacrificial table. The vermilion bird bow. It really is the vermilion bird bow. A fanatical expression appeared on his face, and his eyes were fixed on the vermilion bird bow in front of the vermilion bird statue. Mo Tiange had a bad feeling. She wasn't surprised that Juyin sect knew about the vermilion bird bow. Back then, the 5 saints went to the underground palace together, so how could they not know? However, she didn't expect them to come so soon. Fu Yaozi told her that the other 4 saints didn't know about the secret passage in the storeroom. Back then, they came in through another entrance. The reason why Fu Yaozi knew so much was because he took a lot of secret records about this sect from the Scripture Pavilion's library that recorded experiences. When the 5 saints obtained the cosmos rings of the deification cultivators, he also specifically asked for such jade slips. Thoughts flashed through her mind. She remembered Master Daoist Yuanmu's unusual reaction in front of the storeroom. He was willing to give up a tablet just to take refuge in the storeroom as soon as possible. Could it be that he wanted to preserve his strength and buy time to go to the underground palace? In that case, from the beginning, Julian Sek's goal was the Vermilion Bird Bow in the Vermilion Bird Sacrificial Temple. She stared at Master Daoist Yuanmu and the other two saints vigilantly. If that was the case, with such a precious treasure in front of them, how could they tolerate it? Master Daoist Yuanmu recovered from his frenzy and stared at the three of them with a gloomy gaze. Fellow Taoists disappeared mysteriously because you went to the underground palace a long time ago. It seems your goal is also this Vermilion Bird Bow. Upon hearing Master Daoist Yuanmu's unkind question, the three of them didn't say anything. The current situation was very unfavorable for them. Both sides had three people. Apart from Mo Tiange and Ling Yunhe, who were in the core formation realm, the other side had two late-stage nascent soul cultivators, while they had one middle-stage nascent soul cultivator and one early-stage nascent soul cultivator. Jing Xingji was a sword cultivator, so early-stage nascent soul cultivators were equal to middle-stage nascent soul cultivators. Qin Shi was also a bit stronger than ordinary middle-stage nascent soul cultivators, but this still wasn't enough to close the gap between the two sides. Even if Master Daoist Yuanmu and Master Daoist Iron Mask were slightly injured, the result would still be the same. Of course, it wasn't that they didn't have the strength to fight. Both Qin Shi and Jing Xingji were good at fights of magical powers, and their strength surpassed that of cultivators in the same realm. Even if they couldn't compare to the two late-stage nascent soul cultivators, they wouldn't be as powerless as ordinary cultivators. But if they really fought, they would inevitably pay a heavy price. Junior Martial Brother Yuanmu. Master Daoist Iron Mask took a step forward. His murderous gaze swept over the three people through the black iron mask. Is there any need to say more? In the tense atmosphere, Mo Tiange suddenly chuckled. She stood up and looked at them. Seniors, since your goal is the Vermilion Bird Bow, please go ahead. We won't keep you company. Right after she said that, she walked towards the door of the hole. Wait. Master Daoist Yuanmu's gaze stayed on her for a long time. All of a sudden, a smile appeared on his face. Little friend Mo, if you didn't already have a master, this old man really wanted to take you in as my disciple. What a pity, what a pity. Although he said that, the spiritual aura pressure he released became heavier and heavier. Under Master Daoist Yuanmu's spiritual aura pressure, Mo Tiange managed to say, Julian's sect is full of talented people. With fellow Daoist Ling inheriting its teachings, why does Senior Yuanmu need to feel pity? Although she had the soul-refining art to protect herself, how strong was the spiritual aura pressure of a late nascent soul cultivator? This Master Daoist Yuanmu suddenly praising her at such a critical moment was really not a good thing. What I feel pity is that you juniors are all young and have outstanding cultivation levels. Presumably, your talents are extraordinary, but you're going to fall here. Right after he finished speaking, Master Daoist Yuanmu's body released a fierce murderous aura. Clang! The moment the murderous aura appeared, Qin Shi and Jing Xingji released their sword auras at the same time. With several magic weapons in hand, Mo Tiange became even calmer in this critical moment. She smiled and said, Senior, there's no harm in saying that after you get the Vermilion Bird Bow. It's a bit too early to say that. Ha ha ha. Master Daoist Yuanmu looked up at the sky and laughed. He looked at the three of them with a smile on his face. It seems you've already tried, but you can't take the Vermilion Bird Bow, right? Seeing Master Daoist Yuanmu's confident appearance, the hearts of Mo Tiange and the other two sank. Could it be, Julian's sect has existed for more than 100,000 years, and this secret has also been passed down for more than 100 generations? Since we came for the Vermilion Bird Bow, how could we not be prepared? Upon hearing that, Qin Shi took a step forward. So, before you entered the Immortal Palace, you've already prepared a way to take the Vermilion Bird Bow? Master Daoist Yuanmu nodded with a smile. Yes. With such a precious treasure in front of us, I really can't believe you can ignore this matter, so I can only inconvenience you. Although he said he felt wronged, there wasn't a trace of shame on his face. His smile was full of murderous aura. Chapter 484. The truth was right in front of them. Back then, the 5 saints didn't take away the vermilion bird bough. Saint Guaisian passed this secret to his descendants and found a solution. Not long ago, the 5 holy objects appeared one after another. Julian's sect began to act. They united all the sects to gather the 5 holy objects and entered the mysterious space of the Sea of Returning Ruins to seek the vermilion bird bough enshrined in the vermilion bird sacrificial temple under the Immortal Palace. Before that, the Sutra Depository and the storehouse were all a cover-up. The fated chance Julian's sect was really looking for wasn't here. As she thought up to this point, she couldn't help but sigh. These cultivators from Julian's sect were really scheming. Before, they didn't reveal anything and, like the others, deliberately let her hold them back, but in fact, they had long planned to take the vermilion bird bough away on the last day. In the current cultivation world, she had never heard of the existence of a spiritual magic weapon. This was a sect guarding treasure made by a top cultivator in the Middle Ages using the remains of the vermilion bird, one of the 5 spirits. If Julian's sect obtained it, they would definitely become the #1 sect in the world. She couldn't help but wonder, what about the others? Did Master Hui Yin, Master Zhou, and Sky Glory Demon Venerable also pass this secret down? Yang Qingji wasn't Sky Glory Demon Venerable's successor, so the possibility of him knowing this secret wasn't high. But Jiewu and Han Shizhi, after thinking for a while, Mo Tiange ruled out this possibility. It had been several hours since they went down from the storehouse to the underground palace. If Buddhism and Confucianism also had the same purpose, they should have arrived already. In that case, things were going to be difficult. Without anyone to balance them, they would undoubtedly be at a disadvantage if they directly confronted Julian's sect. Moreover, the other side clearly didn't believe them and wanted to eliminate future troubles. It made sense. With such a precious treasure in front of them, who could trust that they wouldn't have evil intentions and let them go? Mo Tiange sighed inwardly. If she had already advanced to the nascent soul realm, with the 3 of them, even if they couldn't win, escaping wouldn't be a problem, but, her gaze fell on Ling Yunhe, only to find that Ling Yunhe gave her a helpless smile. Now that things had come to this, their hostility was inevitable. Her heart stirred, and she secretly gave Qin Shi and Jing Xingji a meaningful look. Judging from the appearances of Immortal Yuan Mu and Immortal Tai Mian, nothing should have happened to them when they came out of the storeroom and went down to the underground palace. Then, why did Ling Yunhe come instead of Ling Shiyu, who was in the middle stage of nascent soul realm? Even if Ling Shiyu was injured and his strength was greatly reduced, he would still be more useful than a core formation cultivator, wouldn't he? When Qin Shi and Jing Xingji saw Mo Tiange's seemingly unintentional gaze on the Ling Yunhe, they immediately understood, but they remained calm and collected. Amidst the silence, there was suddenly the sharp hum of a sword. Jing Xingji had already drawn his sword. His movements were very fast. As a sword cultivator, he was used to striking first. By the time he heard the sword chime, the area within 30 feet around him had already been surrounded by sword rays. Countless sword rays pierced towards Reverend Yuanmu. Spiritual Master Yuanmu gave a cold snort. He raised his hand and an exquisite small pagoda appeared in his hand. Suddenly, the body of the pagoda became incomparably huge. Layers upon layers of shadows pressed down on the sword ray. The incomparably sharp sword radiance could not advance any further under Yuan Muzhen's casual wave. In the end, a late nascent stage cultivator was a late nascent stage cultivator. Along the way, Reverend Yuanmu didn't show too much strength, but Jing Xingji's sudden attack was easily dealt with by him. In the next moment, Qin Shi's 3-yang real fire sword arrived. He didn't have such a strong sword aura, but the 3-yang real fire on his sword, coupled with the extreme yang real fire that darted out from time to time, made Reverend Yuanmu not dare to underestimate him. The fire element had always been the element of magic best at destruction. Even the lightning element, which was theoretically the most powerful and easiest to break through a cultivator's defense, couldn't compare to the fire element in terms of destructive power. In particular, Qin Shi's secret technique, the extreme yang real fire, could even completely burn Mei Feng's primordial devil aura. It was obvious how overbearing it was. At that moment, Master Daoist Iron Mask finally made his move. He threw out an inconspicuous pebble, which instantly turned into numerous densely packed stones, blocking the 3-yang real fire sword. Even the extreme yang real fire was blocked in front of the stones. Cough! The 4 nascent soul cultivators were very close. The spiritual aura inside Imotianga's body surged under the pressure of their attacks. She had to operate the soul refining art to forcibly suppress it. She turned around to look at Ling Yunhe, only to see him slap a talisman on his body, blocking the spiritual aura fluctuations outside, so he wasn't affected. After the sword light was blocked, Jing Xingji once again operated the sword art. However, as if he was determined to attack Master Daoist Yuanmu, he recklessly attacked him. Master Daoist Yuanmu sneered. Even if they were both in the nascent soul realm, how big was the gap between the early stage and the late stage? For ordinary early stage nascent soul cultivators, even if there were 7 or 8 of them, he wouldn't care. He could kill them with a wave of his hand. This junior's skills weren't bad. He formed his nascent soul at such a young age, and he was also a sword cultivator with the strongest ability in fights of magical powers. Presumably, he'd always thought highly of himself. Now that he faced him face to face, he probably knew the gap between him and a late-stage cultivator, right? His behavior was obviously because he'd suffered a blow and became impulsive. A junior was a junior, even if he was also in the nascent soul realm like them, no. In the next moment, Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't have time to stop. Seeing Jing Xingji's sword light collapsing with one strike, his body swayed and suddenly appeared several hundred feet away behind them. Fellow Daoist, lend me your life. Jing Xingji smiled. His peach blossom eyes curved, and his sword aura formed into a ball, enveloping Ling Yunhe's body. This sudden change made both Master Daoist Yuanmu and Master Daoist Iron Mask slow down. Qin Shi seized this opportunity to withdraw in time. Master Daoist Yuanmu's face turned livid. It wasn't that he and Master Daoist Iron Mask didn't pay attention to Ling Yunhe, but they didn't expect this brat, who was only in the early stage of nascent soul, would actually dare to use the art of teleportation in front of 2 late-stage nascent soul cultivators. The art of teleportation wasn't the same as the art of disappearance. It also required one to cross a distance of 2 points. In other words, when the art of teleportation was used, it was as if time had stopped, and one could walk from one point to another. Therefore, even if one teleported, they couldn't avoid the things between 2 points. Just now, when the 4 nascent soul cultivators fought in the main hall, spiritual aura crisscrossed and fluctuated violently. If someone rashly rushed into the middle, they might only be injured if they were lucky, but if they were unlucky, they might very well be torn apart by these violent spiritual aura fluctuations. Because of this, he and Master Daoist Iron Mask only stood in front of Ling Yunhe to protect him, but they didn't expect Jing Xingji to disregard everything and use the art of teleportation directly to kill Ling Yunhe. This sword cultivator brat was simply too daring. The most terrible thing was that he actually won the gamble. In any case, he was a nascent soul cultivator. At this distance, Ling Yunhe's life was in his hands. The moment he saw Jing Xingji appear, Ling Yunhe wanted to take out the soul restraining bead, but unfortunately, Jing Xingji's movements were too fast, he didn't have enough time. At that moment, his expression was gloomy, and he said coldly, "If Senior wants to use my life to threaten my two martial uncles, I'm afraid you're wrong." "Is that so?" Jing Xingji was still smiling. He turned to look at Master Daoist Yuanmu and Master Daoist Iron Mask, who had stopped fighting. "It seems your two martial uncles don't think so. If Senior doesn't believe me, there's no harm in trying," Ling Yunhe said faintly. The sword aura of a nascent soul sword cultivator was right above his head, but he looked fearless. "Fellow Daoist Ling is courageous." Mo Tiange looked at Ling Yunhe with a smile. "But your words don't count. Fellow Daoists." With the three Yang real fire sword circling around him, Qin Shi looked at Master Daoist Yuanmu and Master Daoist Iron Mask. "What do you think?" Master Daoist Yuanmu's face twitched. In the end, he gnashed his teeth. "He's just a junior. So what if you kill him? Although this brat is an outstanding cultivator among the younger generation, our Julian sect hasn't reached the point where we can't afford to lose a core formation cultivator. Of course you won't care about other core formation cultivators." Mo Tiange's gaze fell on the soul-restraining bead in Ling Yunhe's hand. "But without fellow Daoist Ling, I'm afraid you won't be able to take this vermilion bird bow away, right?" As soon as she finished speaking, the three people's expressions changed dramatically. Ling Yunhe, whose expression hadn't changed a moment ago, was now glaring at Mo Tiange. "Little friend Mo, what do you mean?" These words came out of Master Daoist Yuanmu's mouth one by one. Before Mo Tiange could answer, Qin Shi's divine comprehension swept over Ling Yunhe. All of a sudden, a hint of surprise appeared on his face. "Water and fire dual spiritual roots." Sure enough. Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange pondered. Ling Yunhe's flight light was blue and he was known as a genius, so she always took it for granted that he had a single attribute water spiritual root. It wasn't until just now that she thought the two nascent soul cultivators abandoned Ling Xiyu and brought Ling Yunhe into the sacrificial temple that she realized another possibility. Water and fire dual spiritual roots were relatively rare. Because water and fire opposed each other, it was very difficult for them to exist in the same person. However, this kind of spiritual root could be used to cultivate a special cultivation technique, the ice and fire art. "I see." Jing Xingji put his hand on Ling Yunhe's pulse and said, "Sure enough, he has water and fire dual spiritual roots, and they're both very good. The difference isn't big." Qin Shi smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, your junior spiritual roots are just right for cultivating the ice and fire art. I'm afraid fellow Daoist Ling also doesn't cultivate the ordinary ice and fire art, right?" Mo Tiange said, "Senior Fu Yao said that Dao Saint Guizhen once took a cultivation technique from this place, and it seemed to be one of the top cultivation techniques of this sect." "Let's think about it," Jing Xingji said with a smile. "This vermilion bird bough is the cornerstone treasure of this great ancient sect, so the people of this sect must have a way to take this bough. But they're a cultivation group that specializes in ice attribute cultivation techniques, and this vermilion bird bough is fire attribute. How can they take it? Naturally, they let the people who cultivate the ice and fire art take it," Qin Shi said faintly. "Those who cultivate the ice and fire art will have pure fire spiritual aura and ice spiritual aura inside their bodies. The fire spiritual aura will bring out the power of the vermilion bird bough, and the ice spiritual aura will dissolve the evil aura of the vermilion bird bough. In this way, they don't need to cultivate to a very high realm to be able to take the vermilion bird bough." After Dao Saint Guizhen left, he kept thinking about how to take the vermilion bird bough. It just so happened that what he obtained from this immortal palace was the ice and fire art cultivation technique of this sect. With his intelligence, he naturally guessed this method. Therefore, all these years, your Julian sect has been looking for suitable people to cultivate this ice and fire art, waiting for the right time to gather the 5 holy objects, open this space, and take the vermilion bird bow. In the end, Enchanting concluded, "Seniors, are we right?" Master Daoist Yuanmu's expression was extremely unsightly. The three of them spoke one after another, almost saying everything. Chapter 485. Master Daoist Yuanmu took a deep breath and finally asked calmly, "Tell me, what do you want?" Enchanting and Qin looked at each other, and Qin said, "We don't want anything." "Fine." As the highest director of Julian's sect, Master Daoist Yuanmu made a decision and said calmly without hesitation, "Leave this palace quickly and have nothing to do with each other from now on." Upon hearing what he said, the corners of Enchanting's mouth curved. Just as she was about to say something, she heard Jing Xingji say lazily, "Fellow Daoist, you're right. If we obediently leave after you get the spiritual linking magic weapon, no matter how you look at it, we'll be the ones suffering a loss. Brat, don't push your luck." Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't like Jing Xingji. "If we don't take the treasure, we'll return empty-handed at most. If you keep complaining, you'll die." Ha! A cultivator in the late stage of Yuan is indeed a cultivator in the late stage of Yuan. How domineering. What he said wasn't wrong, but Jing Xingji's tone and expression seemed to be mocking him. However, Master Daoist Yuanmu was a great cultivator after all, so he ignored him and looked at Enchanting and Qin. "What do you think?" "Okay." Qin looked at Enchanting and answered straightforwardly, "The three of us will leave the underground palace, and we'll let this junior come back." Master Daoist Yuanmu raised his eyebrows and said, "If you two don't believe us, we'll go our separate ways. At worst, we'll die here, and you don't have to think about the vermilion bird bow." Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't speak for a while. Seeing the three of them looking indifferent, he secretly clenched his teeth in hatred. These three people were all young juniors, but they acted so shamelessly that they were comparable to old Donkey Ma, who had been in the cultivation world for thousands of years. In fact, he knew this was a psychological battle between the two sides. Were they really willing to die? Probably not. But they dared to bet, and this kind of courage already gave them the chips to win. What about himself? When this space was opened, most of the divine senses on the 5 holy objects dissipated. In other words, they couldn't be recognized as masters again and were no longer the key to this space. Unless they were like the 5 sages, who had also found a way to open up this space. But there was only one day left before the divine palace would be opened. They would not make it. Without a way to open the space, they could only leave the Immortal Palace before the end of the 3 days, and they would not be able to enter again. Under such circumstances, if they missed this opportunity, they would forever lose the chance to obtain the vermilion bird bow. The vermilion bird bow. For the past 100,000 years, the Julian sect had chosen a suitable disciple to cultivate the ice and fire arts in every generation to prepare for the opening of the Sea of Return ruins. It had been more than 100 generations. The goal that had persisted for 100 generations suddenly had the possibility of being realized in his generation. How could he let it go to waste? If that was the case, he would have let down his ancestors, and he would have let down his ancestors. Thinking of this, Daoist Master Yuanmu suddenly felt a sense of exhaustion. He had entered the Julian sect at a young age, and because of his astonishing aptitude, he had been accepted as an inner disciple by a nascent soul cultivator. In the span of several hundred years, he had progressed from an inner disciple to an inner disciple, then to a direct disciple, and finally formed a nascent soul and became a grand supreme elder. Everything had been smooth sailing. At 500 years old, he advanced to the late stage of the nascent soul realm, shocking Yunzhong, and became Julian sect's first grand supreme elder. For the past 400 years, his words were final, and his position was high and powerful. However, under the glory that everyone envied, there was also a burden that others couldn't see. For the past 400 years, for the sake of Joyun sect, he had schemed and racked his brains every time. In fact, he hadn't even reached 1,000 years old. For a great cultivator in the late stage of the nascent soul realm, this was the best time of his life. However, he felt like he was getting old. In particular, competing with these juniors made him feel mentally and physically exhausted. All of a sudden, he wanted to throw all these things away and go back to his days of closed-door meditation and painstakingly cultivate. Taoist Master Yuanmu sighed softly. He waved his hand and said, "I'll give you the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn. After that, Senior Marshal Brother Ironface and I will go to pursue him. I hope you can keep your word and let this brat go before we leave." His tone was very calm, so calm that it sounded a little tired. It seemed he didn't want to argue with them anymore, which surprised the three of them. However, since Taoist Master Yuanmu agreed, their goal was achieved. Qin Shi signaled Jing Xingji to take Ling Yunhe out first. Then he cupped his hands to bid farewell to the two late-stage nascent soul cultivators. Then he and Mo Tiange followed after them. They left the main hall. Sure enough, Taoist Master Yuanmu kept his promise and didn't follow them with Taoist Master Iron Face. "Fellow Taoist Ling, I'm sorry," Mo Tiange said to Ling Yunhe apologetically after they left the main hall. Previously, she was alone and bullied by the three great cultivation groups, but Ling Yunhe had always treated her well. She still remembered this favor. Ling Yunhe shook his head with a calm expression. "Our positions are different. Fellow Taoist Mo, you don't have to take it to heart." Mo Tiange once said this to him. At that time, he never expected he would say the same thing to her one day. He could only say that the affairs of the world were inconstant. They weren't fated to be together, and they didn't even have the chance to coexist peacefully. Mo Tiange sighed softly but didn't say anything. "Let's go," Jing Xingji said. "Is the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn enough for us to get out of the underground palace?" "It should be enough." Only Mo Tiange knew the entrance and exit, so she was naturally the one to answer. "If our luck isn't too bad and we run into a large number of devils along the way." The reason why it took them so long to find the main hall after they went down to the underground palace was because they ran into a large number of devils and were delayed for a long time. Jing Xingji nodded and didn't say anything else. They didn't have much time. The four of them flew at full speed. Mo Tiange's spiritual breath was a bit unstable, so she was carried by Qin Shi while Jing Xingji held Ling Yunhe hostage. The four of them just passed through a stone path when Qin Shi suddenly stopped. "What's going on? What's wrong?" Mo Tiange asked. "Sense your surroundings." In the next moment, the four people's expressions changed. This underground palace and sacrificial temple were full of devil aura. Even in places with relatively light devil aura, they could still feel the chaotic mixture of spirit and devil aura. But at this moment, this kind of chaotic feeling changed. "Devil aura." Ling Yunhe blurted out, pointing at a corner. There was a very faint devil aura there, which was now slowly losing its color. Soon after, everyone could see with their naked eyes that the devil aura around them was slowly disappearing, or in other words, the devil aura was rushing in one direction. She raised her head and glanced at Qin Shi. Both of their eyes were filled with shock. They all knew there was a primordial devil stone tablet in this sacrificial temple, and this primordial devil aura came from this stone tablet. Now that the devil aura was abnormal, it was very likely that there was a problem with the stone tablet. They knew how powerful primordial devil aura was. If there was a problem with this stone tablet, would there be any serious consequences? Not good. Qin Shi suddenly shouted. He pulled Mo Tiange, turned around, and ran. "Let's go back." Jing Xingji was baffled when he heard that, but in the next moment, his expression also changed. He pulled Ling Yunhe and followed behind Qin Shi, running wildly in the direction of the main hall. Devils. Just as they ran back to the main hall, a wave of countless devils surged in the direction where the devil aura disappeared. Returning to the main hall in time and avoiding the wave of devils, the four of them looked terrified. The cultivation levels of these devils weren't very high, and none of them had reached the nascent soul realm. However, there were so many of them that even cultivators in the late nascent soul realm couldn't take them lightly. If they had been a bit slower and collided with these devils, the consequences. Youth, Master Daoist Yuanmu only said 2 words when he saw the devils rushing out of the stone path beside the main hall. His expression froze. He and Master Daoist Iron Mask stayed in the main hall. The vermilion bird's breath was so strong that the devil aura couldn't invade it, and the devils would also avoid it, so they didn't notice the changes outside. Now that he saw so many demonic creatures rushing madly, he spread out his divine sense and knew what was going on. What's going on? Master Daoist Yuanmu muttered to himself. This sudden change made him not care about Mo Tiange and the others coming back. Instead, he looked at Master Daoist Iron Mask. Senior Martial Brother Iron Mask, this, devil aura. It's the stone tablet. Under the black iron mask, Master Daoist Iron Mask's tone was surprised and solemn. Could it be that old guy Guifeng? Even Mo Tiange felt strange about the disappearance of Guifeng Demon Monarch and his disciple, let alone Master Daoist Iron Mask, who was more familiar with Guifeng. In terms of age, he was much older than Master Daoist Yuanmu. He was almost 2,000 years old. Except for major events like the returning ruined sea, he usually cultivated in seclusion, waiting for his death. In Yunzhong, the cultivator in the late nascent soul realm who was closest to his lifespan was Guifeng Demon Monarch. Both of them only had a little more than 100 years left. Even if they used all methods to prolong their lifespans, they wouldn't live more than 500 years. Although the two of them weren't good friends, they understood each other better than others at such a similar age. With Guifeng Demon Monarch's ability, Master Daoist Iron Mask absolutely didn't believe that he would die while searching for the tablet. But they had no idea where he went. Now that the primordial devil aura in the sacrificial temple had changed and many devils were gathering in a certain place, Master Daoist Iron Mask naturally thought of the missing Guifeng Demon Monarch. Could it be that the old guy also hid his true purpose and secretly entered the underground palace to look for the primordial devil tablet? This wasn't impossible. The spiritual beast's aura on the vermilion bird bough couldn't be controlled by devil cultivators, and the primordial devil art was the real top-grade treasure for devil cultivators. Unfortunately, the auras in this sacrificial temple were mixed. Even nascent soul realm cultivators like them couldn't spread their divine senses smoothly, so they couldn't probe the situation in the distance. This sudden change forced the 4 people who had just left back into the main hall. The 2 nascent soul realm cultivators also didn't have the mood to care about their previous agreement. If things were really as they guessed, the situation would be complicated. If Guifeng Demon Monarch absorbed so much devil aura, his strength would definitely increase greatly. He might even be able to use it to advance to the deification realm. Although the vermilion bird bough was useless to him, how could he let such a powerful spirit-connected magic weapon that could threaten him exist? Compared to this, the matter of these 3 juniors was simply negligible. Chapter 486. Let's go. Master Daoist Yuanmu said after his expression changed several times, leave the hall, leave the underground palace. Master Daoist Yuanmu saw Mo Tiange, Qin Shi, and Jing Xingji looking at him in surprise and then at the vermilion bird bough with no intention of leaving, so he said in a deep voice, fellow Taoists, the changes in the devil aura and the demonic creature might be because Guifeng Devil Monarch obtained a treasure. This treasure might not be as precious as the vermilion bird bough, but for a devil cultivator, it's definitely more valuable than the vermilion bird bough. If his strength really soars with this thing, then... Seniors, you don't want the vermilion bird bough anymore. They probably knew more about primordial devil steels in this sacrificial temple than Master Daoist Yuanmu did. Once he said that, Mo Tiange immediately understood the speculation of these two late nascent soul cultivators. After such a thing happened in the underground palace, they naturally wanted to leave as soon as possible, but giving up the vermilion bird bough wasn't something Master Daoist Yuanmu would do. If they missed this kind of spiritual magic weapon, they wouldn't have another chance. Now, this opportunity was right in front of them. Master Daoist Yuanmu's eyes flashed, but he didn't answer directly. Instead, he said, "The changes in the underground palace aren't safe for the three of you. Since we have the same goal now, how about we write off what happened before? Just a moment ago, they fought fiercely, but in just a quarter of an hour, they made up and wrote it off. This change was too fast. However, things in the world were like this. Between gain and loss, the difference between friend and foe was only a matter of interest." But it was unusual for Master Daoist Yuanmu to avoid answering about the vermilion bird bough. Mo Tiange rolled her eyes. When she saw Master Daoist Yuanmu's gaze falling on Ling Yunhe, she asked directly, "Senior, do you want us to agree to let fellow Daoist Ling take the vermilion bird bough before we leave?" Master Daoist Yuanmu paused for a moment, then answered in a deep voice, "Yes. If we want to save our lives, we must leave as soon as possible, but we must take the vermilion bird bough with us." Ha! Jing Xingji raised his mocking smile again. "Fellow Daoist, what good will it do us if we let you take the vermilion bird bough? You've obtained the spiritual magic weapon and achieved your goal, but what about us?" Daoist Master Yuanmu frowned. He suddenly took something from his hand and threw it out. She took it and took a look. It was an interspatial ring. Daoist Master Yuanmu said indifferently, "We found this interspatial ring on the remains of an ancient deity transformation cultivator. I won't lie to you. We've taken most of the things inside, but there are still some crystal jades and materials left. In the current world of cultivators, this interspatial ring alone is something that can only be found by luck. Together with the things inside, it is worth more than all the possessions of the three of you. How about I compensate you with this item?" Qin Shi probed it with his divine sense and saw that there were hundreds of crystal jades, tens of thousands of high-grade spirit stones, and some strange materials inside. The magic treasures and some commonly used precious items were gone. They should have been taken away by them. He threw the Cosmos ring back to Mo Tiange, then went to check on Jing Xingji. Jing Xingji hesitated for a moment, then nodded slightly at him. His words were sarcastic, but it wasn't because he didn't understand the situation. The three of them weren't strong enough, so it was impossible for them to seize the vermilion bird bough. It was already a very good result to be able to split some ancient cultivator treasures from the two late nascent soul cultivators. Mo Tiange held the Cosmos ring and shifted her gaze to Daoist Master Yuanmu and Iron Face. If the three of them were ordinary cultivators, not to mention this Cosmos ring, the hundreds of crystal jades inside would indeed be worth all the possessions of the three of them. Daoist Master Yuanmu could be considered generous. Although this couldn't compare to the vermilion bird bough, the three of them were already at a disadvantage, so it was impossible for them to get more things out of it. The number of demonic creatures passing through the main hall gradually decreased, and the devil aura also became thinner and thinner. Daoist Master Yuanmu was a bit anxious. "Fellow Daoists, quickly decide. We don't have much time." "Senior Yuanmu." Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then asked, "How can you guarantee that once we leave the underground palace, you won't turn hostile?" Daoist Master Yuanmu didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to look at the vermilion bird bough. Even after more than 100,000 years, the golden bough was still shining with dazzling light. It was surrounded by raging flames, and the vermilion bird's breath was warm and full of power. Even just by looking at it, the invisible spiritual aura pressure made people unable to look at it directly. Nowadays, cultivators in the cultivation world habitually referred to powerful magic weapons or materials as spiritual treasures. In fact, according to the Middle Ages saying, only psychic magic weapons could be called spiritual treasures. After the changes in the world, the method of refining psychic magic weapons had long been lost. Even if it had been passed down to this day, it couldn't be refined anymore. Because those materials were all amazing natural treasures that could no longer be found in today's cultivation world. Even in the Middle Ages, not every high-level cultivator could own a psychic magic weapon. Only some big sects had a few psychic magic weapons. Now, there was a psychic magic weapon in front of him. Furthermore, it was the sect-guarding treasure of a big ancient sect. How could he let it go? That being the case, I swear on my inner demon that I won't take the initiative to attack the 3 fellow Taoists inside the Immortal Palace. If I violate this oath, I'll be trapped by my inner demon, suffer from chi deviation, and lose all my cultivation. What do you think? Mo Tiange and Qin Shi glanced at each other in astonishment. Even Jing Xingji was dumbfounded. For a cultivator in the late nascent soul stage, suffering from chi deviation and losing all his cultivation could be considered a very serious oath. Moreover, it was an inner demon oath. Master Daoist Yuanmu seemed very sincere to be able to make such an oath. Since fellow Daoist has made such an oath, we have nothing to doubt, Qin Shi said when he saw that Mo Tiange and Jing Xingji didn't have any intention of objecting. Master Daoist Yuanmu was overjoyed. He looked at Ling Yunhe, who was restrained by Jing Xingji. There's no time to lose. Fellow Daoist Jing Xingji wasn't a sloppy person. He sighed softly and withdrew the sword aura enveloping Ling Yunhe's body. Although he simply let go of Ling Yunhe, he still looked at the vermilion bird bough with reluctance. Such a psychic magic weapon was right in front of him, but he had to watch helplessly as it was taken away by someone else. This kind of feeling was really unpleasant. But what could he do? He hadn't advanced to the nascent soul realm for long, so he wasn't a match for Ling Yunhe at all. This world was like this. With strength, you could seize even more treasures, and with treasures, your strength would be even stronger. Yunhe, go. Under Master Daoist Yuanmu's ardent gaze, Ling Yunhe took a deep breath then slowly walked towards the altar table. The vermilion bird bough. Before the holy object was born, he never knew that the cultivation technique he practiced since he was a child was for the sake of this psychic magic weapon. When he was little, he already felt strange. He was only from a branch family, and he didn't have single or mutated spiritual roots. The nascent soul great ancestor of Ling clan obviously had his own direct descendant, his eldest brother, who was injured in the Sea of Returning Ruins and couldn't participate in the sect head selection, but he only favored him. His cultivation technique was personally passed on by his grandfather, and he often received pointers in the process of cultivation. This made his other brothers very jealous. They always said the reason why he was so far ahead of his peers was because of his grandfather's personal pointers. Otherwise, how could he compare to those geniuses with single or mutated spiritual roots by relying solely on his double spiritual roots? For this reason, he cultivated assiduously and never slacked off because he wanted to prove that he was worthy of everything. But in reality, if a double spiritual root with balanced fire and water practiced the ice and fire technique, it wouldn't be inferior to a single or mutated spiritual root. And the ice and fire technique that his grandfather passed on to him was one of the top cultivation techniques of this ancient sect. Excellent aptitude, top-notch cultivation technique, good comprehension, and his unremitting hard work, all of these made him a genius. It was precisely because he was neither arrogant nor rash, and diligent that his grandfather was even more satisfied with him. Even the head Grand Supreme Elder praised him very much. He even thought that he had finally used his actions to prove his worth. However, decades ago, when the Heavenly Demon Tower appeared, he only knew that there was such a reason why he received so much attention. The Vermilion Bird Bow. It turned out that for the past 100,000 years, he was chosen by every generation of Joyin clan to take the Vermilion Bird Bow. He couldn't deny that when he learned the truth, he was a little disappointed. It turned out that no matter how hard he worked, as long as he practiced the ice and fire technique, he would receive this kind of attention. But after thinking about it, he felt relieved. Even if that was the case, so what? In the 100,000 years of Joyin clan's existence, countless ancestors were chosen to cultivate the ice and fire technique. Most of them cultivated to the nascent soul stage, but even when they died, they couldn't wait for the opening of the Sea of Returning Ruins and couldn't see the Vermilion Bird Bow. In comparison, what did he have to feel aggrieved? From another perspective, the opportunity passed down by the ancestral master and the greatest secret of Joyin clan were all tied to him. How great of an honor was this? As the sect leader of Joyin clan and an elite disciple nurtured by the sect since young, he had already received enough. What did it matter if he did something for the sect? Moreover, this Vermilion Bird Bow would ultimately be controlled by him. What else did he have to be dissatisfied with? It was a psychic magic treasure. For the past 100,000 years, the ancestors of the past generations had never seen a psychic magic treasure. It was a psychic magic treasure that no longer existed in the entire human world. In the end, it fell into his hands. To a cultivator, this was an almost impossible dream. His hand touched the Vermilion Bird Bow. The flames on it leaped twice, emitting a soft sound as if it was resisting, but the resistance wasn't intense. At that moment, a faint icy mist rose from his arm and enveloped his body. The icy mist and the flames collided and swallowed each other, eventually suppressing the resistance. Seeing this scene, Master Daoist Yuanmu looked happy, but Mo Tiange and the other two couldn't help but look disappointed. Although they'd already given up on the Vermilion Bird Bow rationally, they still felt unwilling when they saw Ling Yunhe actually pick it up. But what could they do? They weren't as strong as him, and they couldn't pick up the Vermilion Bird Bow. It was said that spiritual treasures had their own spirituality and could choose their own masters. They had no fate with it and could only sigh helplessly. Ling Yunhe smiled. Just as he was about to pick up the Vermilion Bird Bow, a powerful force suddenly gushed out of the bow and poured into his body. "Ah!" He cried out in alarm. The pain was unbearable. This force was too overbearing. It poured into his palm, passed through his meridians, and rushed into his dantian, almost tearing him apart. Yunhe. Master Daoist Yuanmu's expression changed greatly and he rushed forward. Chapter 487. Spiritual Aura Explosion. Upon seeing this scene, Qin muttered in a low voice. Although it wasn't a real spiritual aura explosion, the principle was the same. The Vermilion Bird Bow was a psychic magic weapon and was born with spirituality. If one wanted to pick it up, they had to get its approval. There was a strong vermilion bird's breath on the Vermilion Bird Bow, so if one wanted to tame it, they had to bear this kind of divine power first. With so much vermilion bird's breath pouring into Ling Yunhe's body, if he couldn't bear it, the result would be the same as spiritual aura explosion. Master Daoist Yuanmu rushed forward, followed by Master Daoist Iron Mask. The three of them watched nervously. Could Ling Yunhe bear this kind of power? Would he tame the Vermilion Bird Bow or would he be torn apart by the Vermilion Bird's breath? Logically speaking, as a core formation cultivator, his body shouldn't be able to bear this kind of power. However, He cultivated the ice and fire arts specially prepared for the vermilion bird bow by the ancient Great Ice Palace. Who knew if there was something special about this technique that could dissolve the power of the vermilion bird's breath? As the vermilion bird's breath poured in, the icy mist around Ling Yunhe's body became thinner and was gradually swallowed by the flames. The expression on his face became more and more painful, and his whole body slowly turned red as if he had become a red-hot soldering iron. Even the flow of the spiritual aura in his meridians could be seen clearly. Seeing that Ling Yunhe's meridians had almost reached their limit and the divine power from the vermilion bird bow was still pouring in, Master Daoist Yuanmu clenched his teeth and hit the middle of Ling Yunhe's back with his palm. If he let things continue like this, Ling Yunhe probably wouldn't be able to escape the fate of exploding and dying. Since the vermilion bird's breath had already started pouring in, it couldn't be stopped. Therefore, Master Daoist Yuanmu thought of this method to let the extra vermilion bird's breath out of Ling Yunhe's body through another exit. This exit was himself. With Master Daoist Yuanmu sharing the burden, Ling Yunhe's pain was slightly alleviated. However, even Master Daoist Yuanmu didn't feel relaxed when facing the vermilion bird's breath. In the distant past, spiritual magic weapons like the vermilion bird bow could only be controlled by high-level cultivators. The high-level cultivators in the distant past were not the nascent soul realm of today, but the body integration realm or even the Mahayana realm. Compared to a body integration stage cultivator, a nascent soul cultivator was nothing more than an insignificant junior, so how could they withstand the power of the vermilion bird's aura? If it wasn't for the cloud-soaring crane acting as a buffer, he would have directly gone to take it himself. His ending would have been no different from Jing Xingji and Qin Shi's. Gradually, spiritual master Yuanmu's face flushed red. His meridians and dantian could no longer withstand such intense vermilion bird divine power. Seeing this, the Iron Mask spiritual master also came forward. Senior brother. Perfected Yuanmu gritted his teeth. Conserve your strength. Beneath the black iron mask, Master Daoist Iron Mask's eyes flashed. He paused for a moment, but in the next second, he suddenly reached out to grab Emotianga. With a sharp whistle, the three-yang real fire sword flew out. Qin Shi stood in front of her and shouted, "What do you want to do?" Master Daoist Iron Face's reaction was extremely fast. Since his attack missed, a light flashed in his hand and a long, jet-black whip appeared in his hand. With a flick of his hand, it once again lashed towards Emotianga. Qin Shi was furious. Just now, Master Daoist Yuanmu made a heart demon oath, so they believed him. However, he didn't expect that Master Daoist Iron Mask, who had been silent like a shadow, would suddenly attack them. If it was just Master Daoist Iron Mask alone, Qin Shi and Jing Xingji wouldn't be afraid. However, Master Daoist Iron Mask was an old monster who had lived for almost 2,000 years. He had rich experience in fights of magical powers and his methods were shrewd and ruthless. His sudden attack caught Qin Shi off guard. Qin Shi had no choice but to change the three-yang real fire sword formation into a huge sword which chopped down at Master Daoist Iron Mask, blocking the momentum of the long whip. Fortunately, Jing Xingji's flying sword also arrived. His reaction wasn't slow, but he was a little far away. Seeing that his attack was resolved by Qin Shi and that Jing Xingji's flying sword was behind him, Master Daoist Iron Mask didn't move. He just shook his sleeves and released his spiritual aura. A huge shield suddenly appeared behind him, protecting him. Then, he forcibly withstood Jing Xingji's flying sword attack and still attacked Emotianga unyieldingly. Qin Shi didn't understand what he wanted to do, but his opponent's behavior had already angered him. Master Daoist Iron Mask used Invisible Sword. The golden sword aura was surrounded by the three-yang real fire, then one turned into two turned into four, and in an instant, it turned into hundreds of sword auras which pierced towards Master Daoist Iron Mask. This time, Master Daoist Iron Mask finally couldn't take it head-on. Although his cultivation level was high and he was also rich in experience, his strength wasn't at the top among late-stage nascent soul cultivators. Under Jing Xingji's attack, he couldn't hold on for too long. After all, the attack power of a sword cultivator wasn't something ordinary cultivators could compare to. Facing Qin Shi's attack, he chose to retreat. But in the next moment, after avoiding the sword's edge, Master Daoist Iron Mask's body suddenly burst with a strong momentum. He retreated in order to advance. A late-stage nascent soul cultivator, even if he wasn't good at fights of magical powers, was still terrifying when he went all out without holding back his spiritual power. Master Daoist Iron Mask swung his long whip, sweeping it towards Mo Tiange with a whistling sound. Qin Shi was shaken by his momentum, so in a hurry, he only had time to command his sword aura to block it. With a tchi sound, the sword aura and the long whip tangled together. Their spiritual auras intertwined and fought each other, and for a while, they fell into a stalemate. Master Daoist Iron Mask seemed to be a bit anxious. Completely disregarding Jing Xingji behind him, he once again burst out his momentum. Seeing that Master Daoist Iron Mask didn't care about anything else, Qin Shi's spiritual aura fluctuated violently. Afraid he would hurt Mo Tiange, he hurriedly pushed her away and went to meet the attack himself. Boom! This was a head-on collision of spiritual auras. The violent spiritual aura fluctuation even pushed Mo Tiange aside. Not far from them, Ling Yunhe and Master Daoist Yuanmu, who were sitting in front of the sacrificial table, weren't affected at all because of the vermilion bird's breath. Although Qin Shi wouldn't be unable to withstand such a collision of spiritual auras, he had no choice but to avoid it for the time being. Master Daoist Iron Mask swung his sleeve, throwing out the pebble he used in the fights of magical powers again. The pebble turned into a huge boulder, pressing down on Qin Shi. Qin Shi spread his arms. The three-yang real fire sword turned into a sword light and collided with the huge boulder. In the next moment, his figure flashed. He used the teleportation technique and arrived in front of Ling Yunhe. "Fellow Daoist Iron Mask," he shouted sternly. "If you still want to fight, I'll kill you, a junior, as well." Ling Yunhe was being tested by the vermilion bird's divine power, and Master Daoist Yuanmu's body was also full of the vermilion bird's breath. Both of them couldn't move. Qin Shi was now standing next to them. It could be said that their lives were hanging in his hands. Master Daoist Iron Mask paused, regret flashing in his eyes. Jing Xingji had already used Ling Yunhe's life to threaten them before, but he regretted that he was too anxious just now, giving Qin Shi an opening. Seeing that Master Daoist Iron Mask had stopped, Qin Shi turned to look at Mo Tiange. It was only when he saw that she had taken out all her magic weapons and was far away that he felt relieved. At this distance, if Master Daoist Iron Mask still dared to fight, both he and Jing Xingji would be able to stop him in time. "Fellow Daoist Iron Mask, what do you mean?" "Fellow Daoist Yuanmu has already made a heart demon oath. Do you think you can kill us by yourself?" Master Daoist Iron Mask's gaze shifted, but he didn't say anything. "Qin Shoujing, why are you being so polite with him?" Jing Xingji said coldly as he stepped forward with a flying sword in his hand. "No matter what he wants to do, since he's already made his move, why don't we take this opportunity to kill him? We can't defeat two late-stage, nascent soul cultivators, but do we have to be afraid of one?" Jing Xingji was a typical sword cultivator. He was the best at seizing opportunities to kill with one strike. Right now, Master Daoist Yuanmu couldn't move and only Master Daoist Iron Mask was left. If the two of them worked together, their chances of killing him would be very high. At that time, even if Master Daoist Yuanmu escaped, he wouldn't be able to do anything to them, and they wouldn't have to compromise for their lives. But Qin Shi wasn't as ruthless as him. They'd clearly agreed before, and they didn't take advantage of him, so why did Master Daoist Iron Mask suddenly attack them? Moreover, his target was Emotinga, which was too strange. Master Daoist Iron Mask half-turned his body and said in a deep, hoarse voice, "Humph. It's not that easy to kill me." He'd been trapped in the nascent soul realm for so many years, so how could he not have one or two life-saving secret techniques? Besides, they could kill his body, but could they kill his nascent soul? Even if he was besieged by two late-stage nascent soul cultivators, his nascent soul wasn't that easy to kill. However, his lifespan was almost up, so even if his nascent soul escaped, it would be meaningless. Thinking up to this point, the pair of eyes exposed under the black iron mask became gloomy, and he looked regretfully at Master Daoist Yuanmu and Ling Yunhe. He'd lived for nearly 2,000 years, and his lifespan was almost up. The remaining 100 or so years weren't enough for him to cultivate to the peak stage of the late stage. Even if he obtained the fated chance of the deification realm, he wouldn't have a chance to advance to the deification realm. This trip to the Sea of Returning Ruins was originally his last chance to do something for the sect. Even if he died here, it would be worth it. However, the current situation caused him to feel a sense of despair. This junior martial brother Yuanmu was much younger than him. Back then, he was already a nascent soul cultivator, while this junior martial brother was just a beginner. In just a few hundred years, he had already become a great late-stage nascent soul cultivator who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. With nearly 1,000 years of lifespan left, this talented junior martial brother was very likely to advance to the deification realm. In addition, this brat who cultivated the ice and fire arts would go to the underground palace to get the vermilion bird bough. This was the purpose of their trip. Junior martial brother Yuanmu would obtain the fated chance of the deification realm, and that brat from Ling family would take the vermilion bird bough. The hateful thing was that it seemed very difficult to achieve now. If they couldn't resolve the vermilion bird's breath, the two of them might die here together. Deification realm. Vermilion bird bough. Everything would become a bubble. He sighed. Not for his own meaningless sacrifice, but for the foundation of Zhuyan's sect, but what happened next stunned him. "This is, senior martial brother." Mo Tiange also shouted. Qin Shi was slightly startled. He suddenly felt something was wrong. He lowered his head and widened his eyes in shock. In order to threaten Master Daoist Iron Mask, he stood very close to Ling Yunhe. At that moment, the vermilion bird's breath on Ling Yunhe and Master Daoist Yuanmu's bodies was overflowing. Their meridians and dantians couldn't contain it anymore. Without an exit, the vermilion bird's breath that was stuck on Ling Yunhe and Master Daoist Yuanmu's bodies actually spread out and turned into flames, wrapping around his body. Sharp pain. This was his first feeling. It wasn't that he hadn't been injured before. In the 100 years he was in the core formation realm, he'd suffered countless injuries, big and small. Among them, there were even a few that caused his cultivation level to plummet and he almost lost his life. However, none of them made him feel this kind of sharp pain, as if even his soul was being burned. This was the power of the vermilion bird's breath, the vermilion bird's divine power. He suddenly understood Master Daoist Iron Mask's action just now. He wanted to grab Mo Tiange and let Ling Yunhe transfer the remaining vermilion bird's breath to her body so he could use her as an exit. Unfortunately, his attack didn't hit. He failed. But inadvertently, he created such an exit. What should I do? He tried to break free, but this vermilion bird's breath firmly entangled him, making him unable to move even half an inch. He felt his meridians rapidly being occupied by the heat then rushing into his dantian, but he was powerless to do anything. Hearing a familiar shout, he looked towards Mo Tiange. He saw her rushing towards him, but he couldn't even lift his hand. He only had enough time to look at Jing Xingji. "Stop her," he silently said. Chapter 488. Senior Martial Brother. Don't go over there. Jing Xingji's figure flashed and stopped in front of Mo Tiange, shouting fiercely. Mo Tiange didn't even look at him. Jing Xingji helplessly grabbed her arm and spiritual aura gushed out from his palm. Under the fierce sword intent of a nascent soul sword cultivator, Mo Tiange couldn't move and could only watch helplessly. Qin Shi was completely engulfed by the vermilion bird's breath. His whole body was surrounded by red mist, but the vermilion bird's breath still spread out from the cloud-soaring crane's body and rushed towards him. You can't solve anything if you go over there. Jing Xingji said calmly, this vermilion bird's breath is so overbearing. You're only in the core formation realm. If Qin Shoujing can't stand it, you'll only die if you go. Mo Tiange couldn't hear what he said. She just watched Qin Shi being surrounded by the vermilion bird's breath, and her heart suddenly felt empty. She could only hope that the divine power on the vermilion bird bow would be exhausted before he couldn't stand it anymore. As for who the vermilion bird bow belonged to, she didn't care. She didn't care if it helped someone else, it was enough as long as he could keep his life. However, the vermilion bird's breath seemed endless. It kept pouring into the cloud-soaring crane's meridians, then flowed out of the cloud-soaring crane's body and wrapped around Qin Shi. The red mist on Qin Shi's body became thicker and thicker. In the end, he seemed to be bathed in blood, and his figure couldn't be seen clearly. Seeing this scene, Master Iron Mask was both happy and worried. He originally wanted to catch someone to share the pressure of the vermilion bird's breath, but Qin Shi and Jing Xingji were nascent soul cultivators, so he had to attack Mo Tiange, who had the lowest cultivation level. He didn't expect that the vermilion bird's breath would find Qin Shi. He was already in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, so he could bear much more divine power than Mo Tiange. Maybe he alone would be enough. However, this vermilion bird's breath was so strong. Seeing that Qin Shi's body was already covered with it and showed no signs of stopping, Master Iron Mask couldn't help but worry. If Qin Shi wasn't enough, what should he do? His original plan was to risk his life to share the burden of the vermilion bird's divine power, but they had already fought just now. With that sword cultivator's vicious and merciless personality, he would most likely take advantage of the situation and lose his life in vain. With this thought, Iron Mask didn't know what to do and could only watch helplessly. Boom! The blood mist became extremely thick. All of a sudden, a loud explosion rang out from Qin Shi's body. The blood mist unexpectedly turned into flames, burning fiercely. Mo Tiange turned pale with fright. What kind of situation is this? The flame formed by the vermilion bird's breath contained the vermilion bird's divine power. Even Qin Shi's extreme yang real fire was extremely afraid of it. If it directly burned his body, would he still be alive? Ha! To the side, Jing Xingji exclaimed softly in surprise. He muttered to himself, this is too strange. At this very moment, Ling Yunhe's hand was gripping the vermilion bird bow. The breath of the vermilion bird entered his meridians through his palm, and then flowed into Reverend Yuanmu's body. Nevertheless, Master Daoist Yuanmu's whole body was red, and his meridians and dantian were filled with vermilion bird's breath. Qin Shi's situation was different from theirs. First, he hadn't come into contact with Ling Yunhe before, so it could be said that the vermilion bird's breath took the initiative to find him. Second, the vermilion bird's breath on his body was in the form of a red mist, unlike the other two's, which directly entered his meridians. Third, the other two didn't have flames on their bodies, but Qin Shi's eventually turned into flames. In just a short while, the flames had completely surrounded Qin Shi. Aside from a hazy shadow, nothing else could be seen. Just when the others thought he was going to be burned to ashes by the flames, a hazy white light suddenly appeared in his dantian. At first, this white light was only a tiny dot hidden in the flames. It was so faint that it seemed like an illusion. But gradually, the white light became brighter and bigger. In the end, it even competed with the vermilion bird's flames. Boom! Another dull sound rang out. The vermilion bird's breath seemed to crazily rush towards Qin Shi. From the vermilion bird Bao, from Ling Yunhe, and even from Master Daoist Yuanmu. These vermilion birds' breaths flowed into Qin Shi's body, turning into flames and rushing towards that white light. This is... Jing Xingji and Master Daoist Iron Mask were both dumbfounded. What kind of situation was this? Mo Tiange was stunned, but she suddenly thought of something. She was overjoyed. Yang spiritual bead. She almost forgot that Qin Shi had a Yang spiritual bead on him. Lord Daoist Jinghe said Yang spiritual beads were strange objects born in spirit veins. They specialized in swallowing the Yang spiritual aura in spirit veins. Over time, they swallowed all the Yang spiritual aura in the spirit veins and produced Yang spiritual beads. According to this, Yang spiritual beads contained inexhaustible spiritual aura. If they were completely released, even a deification cultivator's body would easily explode from the spiritual aura. Because a Yang spiritual bead could produce Yang spiritual beads, it was impossible for a deification cultivator to have more spiritual aura than a spirit vein. Since a Yang spiritual bead could contain so much spiritual aura, could it also contain the divine power brought by the vermilion bird's breath? When she thought of this, Mo Tiange felt like she had been rescued from a desperate situation. Hope once again emerged in her heart. Yang spiritual bead. Jing Xingji frowned slightly in confusion. Although Qin Shi was with him when he obtained the Yang spiritual bead, Jing Xingji didn't know what kind of Yang spiritual bead that unremarkable bead was. If he knew, he would definitely regret it so much that his intestines would turn green. Back then, he simply didn't care about that bead. When they were dividing the spoils of war, he casually threw it to Qin Shi. It was precisely because of this Yang spiritual bead that Qin Shi cultivated faster than him, had more fated chances than him, and even obtained a top-notch cultivation technique, the pure Yang technique, from a deification cultivator. It even led to the marriage between Qin Shi and Mo Tiange. Fortunately, he didn't know that sometimes, ignorance was also a kind of happiness. The white light became brighter and brighter, and the speed at which the vermilion bird's breath rushed towards Qin Shi also became faster and faster. Master Daoist Iron Mask's expression became a bit strange. His intuition told him that something was wrong. The Yang spiritual bead shone brightly, but the vermilion bird Bao's light became dimmer and dimmer. The vermilion bird's breath on Ling Yunhe and Master Daoist Yuanmu also became lesser and lesser. All of this vermilion bird's breath rushed towards Qin Shi. After a long time, maybe a quarter of an hour, maybe even shorter, the flames on the vermilion bird Bao finally swayed, dimmed, and finally disappeared. Without the vermilion bird's breath, it only looked like a simple and exquisite weapon. The vermilion bird's breath on Ling Yunhe and Master Daoist Yuanmu also completely disappeared. Without the support of the vermilion bird's divine power, the two of them suddenly collapsed to the ground. Master Daoist Iron Mask was stunned for a moment. He then rushed forward to check Ling Yunhe and Master Daoist Yuanmu's situation. After checking their pulse, Master Daoist Iron Mask was dumbfounded. After a while, he sat paralyzed on the ground. Their meridians and dantians were forcibly rushed by the vermilion bird's breath. Although their meridians weren't broken, they were more or less damaged. Ling Yunhe was in a slightly better condition. He cultivated the ice and fire arts, so the fire spiritual aura in it was compatible with the vermilion bird's breath. It was just that his meridians were forcibly widened and were slightly damaged. Master Daoist Yuanmu, on the other hand, had his meridians broken and he almost had no spiritual aura left. This vermilion bird bow was, after all, an ancient spirit-seeking magic weapon. Even though Master Daoist Yuanmu was already a great cultivator in the late nascent soul stage, he still couldn't bear such a powerful vermilion bird's divine power. What made Master Daoist Iron Mask so pale was actually the vermilion bird bow on the offering table. Without the vermilion bird's breath, it would also lose the vermilion bird's divine power. Would it still be a spirit-connecting magic weapon? Besides, Ling Yunhe had already fainted, but the vermilion bird bow was still sitting on the offering table. No matter how he looked at it, it didn't look like the vermilion bird bow had already been subdued. He couldn't help but think, could it be that the ancestors' dying wish and the efforts of Zhouyan's 600,000 years and more than 100 generations were simply an illusion? Was their guess wrong, or was Ling Yunhe's cultivation level not high enough? The flames on Qin Shi's body also slowly dimmed. When the last flame disappeared, the vermilion bird bow on the offering table swayed a bit then flew towards him. Along with the flames, it entered his body. Because the yang spiritual bead absorbed the vermilion bird's breath, its color was no longer pure white but light red. After it completely swallowed the vermilion bird's breath, the yang spiritual bead flashed for a moment before its light also slowly dimmed and eventually disappeared. As for Qin Shi, he fell head first. "Senior Martial Brother!" Mo Tiange shouted. Seeing that there was no more danger, Jing Xingji withdrew his sword intent and let go of her. She rushed forward, knelt down, and helped Qin Shi up. Qin Shi's eyes were closed, his teeth were tightly clenched, and his complexion was deathly pale. Mo Tiange's heart was beating fiercely. She reached out to feel his pulse and found that there was still spiritual breath flowing. Only then did she heave a sigh of relief, feeling a little vitality in her empty heart. "He's alive, at least he's still alive." Jing Xingji walked over and also felt Qin Shi's pulse, but the wrinkle on his brows became tighter and tighter. "What's wrong?" Mo Tiange asked nervously. Due to the gap in their cultivation levels, she couldn't use her spiritual aura to investigate the specific situation inside Qin Shi's body. She only knew that there was spiritual aura in his meridians. After a long time, Jing Xingji finally let go of Qin Shi's pulse and said, "It's very bad. The spiritual aura inside his body is almost empty, his sea of knowledge is closed, and his dantian is damaged." He glanced at Mo Tiange, deliberated over his words then said carefully, "Although he didn't die this time, I don't know if he can hold on in this kind of situation." Mo Tiange was stunned for a while. She had also encountered this kind of situation before when her sea of knowledge was closed. The sea of knowledge was where one's thoughts resided. Once the sea of knowledge was closed, a person was equivalent to a living dead without consciousness. What was worse was that the spiritual aura inside his body was almost empty, and his dantian was damaged. Without consciousness, cultivators couldn't cultivate, and without cultivating, they couldn't absorb spiritual aura to heal their injuries. If they couldn't heal their injuries, their dantian's injuries would worsen step by step. At that time, their bodies would slowly collapse, and they would die unconsciously. Even if they survived, their cultivation levels would drop a lot when they woke up one day. Fortunately, Qin Shi was already a nascent soul cultivator. His body was reconstructed when he formed his nascent soul, and he also practiced body refining techniques. As long as his dantian was protected, his body shouldn't shrink. But even so, it was unknown when he would open his sea of knowledge and wake up. Maybe 1 or 2 days, maybe 1 or 2 years, or even 10 or 100 years, this was the reason why Jing Xingji found it hard to say. In the main hall, the 3 living people and the 3 half-dead people all fell into silence. After a while, Jing Xingji suddenly raised his head vigilantly. "We can't delay any longer. Let's get out." The devil aura outside had almost completely dissipated. In other words, if Master Daoist Yuanmu's guess was correct, the primordial devil aura had already been absorbed. If the person who absorbed the primordial devil aura needed time to fuse with it, that would still be a good thing. But if he came to the main hall immediately, Master Daoist Iron Mask seemed to be roused. He looked at the unconscious Ling Yunhe and Master Daoist Yuanmu and stared at them with a heavy gaze. Jing Xingji immediately sensed it. With a shake of his arm, the flying sword hovered in the air. But Master Daoist Iron Mask didn't make a move. After a moment of silence, he pulled Ling Yunhe and Master Daoist Yuanmu up without saying a word and flew away without looking back. Seeing this, Jing Xingji's tense nerves relaxed. There was a huge gap between his and Master Daoist Iron Mask's cultivation levels. If they fought, it would be really bad. But if he ignored these two people and fled on his own, he would feel bad. He lowered his head to look at the unconscious Qin Shi and the heavy-looking Emotinga. All of a sudden, he really wanted to slap himself. He, Jing Xingji, had lived for nearly 300 years and had always been decisive and ruthless. He never hesitated when he had to be ruthless. In the current situation, if he was ruthless enough, he should have seized the opportunity to snatch them away. Even if he couldn't snatch them away, he should have run far away to avoid trouble. But why couldn't he move now? Chapter 489. Fellow Daoist Qingwei. Jing Xingji's voice brought Imo Tiange back to reality. She took a deep breath and tried her best to calm down. Things had already happened. It was useless to be sad and dazed. She should think of a way to solve it. She lowered her head and looked at his ignorant appearance. She made up her mind. Every time, it was you who protected me. This time, let me protect you. Let's go. Jing Xingji felt comforted when he saw the light in her eyes. Mo Qingwei knew what was important. If she only cared about being sad at this time, he would feel sorry for Qin Shoujing for marrying such a stupid woman. Mo Tiange looked up and suddenly asked, "Fellow Daoist Jing, can you protect us from the passage to the Immortal Palace by yourself?" Jing Xingji was stunned and said nothing. The temporarily open passage to the Immortal Palace was extremely dangerous. Not to mention protecting a living dead and a core formation cultivator, he was already in danger when he came in. With the experience of coming in, it would be a bit easier for him to go out, but that was it. "We can't go," Mo Tiange said slowly. "There's not much time left. Presumably, the surviving cultivators in the Immortal Palace have already left. I'm only in the core formation realm, and Senior Marshal Brother is half dead. They know we got treasures from the Immortal Palace. As soon as we show up, I'm afraid we won't be able to escape the fate of being killed and robbed." At that time, even the kindest revered Wu Ming couldn't stand up to protect them. She looked up at Jing Xingji and said, "Fellow Daoist Jing, it's already good enough that you can leave here safely by yourself. There are so many late-stage cultivators outside. How can you protect the two of us? Besides, if you stay with us, you'll also be implicated. Although you're very annoying, you're always trustworthy at critical moments. I don't want to drag you down anymore." Ha! Jing Xingji showed a bitter smile. He really didn't know whether he should be happy or depressed. Although he was extremely unlucky and wasn't liked by his master, he had always been successful among women. In the end, she said he had a very annoying personality. Even so, in the cultivation world, where there were few sincere people, she was willing to trust him. Looking down at the woman in front of him, he suddenly heaved a long sigh. The death of his master and the unfair treatment he received in the ancient sword sect caused him to harbor hostility towards everyone in the world. For so many years, he had always put on a playful attitude. His tongue was like honey, and his attitude was frivolous. However, in reality, he was just a bystander, not willing to get close to everyone. Qin Shoujing was an exception, because when they first met, she was still a proud son of heaven. It was also because from the beginning to the end, whether she was a proud son of heaven or an abandoned disciple of Gujin sect, his attitude was always the same. He actually held a certain amount of gratitude towards Qin Shoujing. Because Qin Shoujing was the only person he could be sure of who treated him with sincerity. And now, there was one more, a person who expressed his sincerity to him regardless of whether he liked or hated him. We still have to leave the underground palace. It's very dangerous here. Jing Xingji said, as for after we leave, if you're willing to part with your treasures, we can trade with others in exchange for their protection. Mo Tienge shook her head lightly. Who should I trade with? Everyone knows that senior brother and I will definitely obtain the treasure. Everyone is envious. Originally, trading with the Julian sect was extremely good. They have 2 late nascent soul cultivators, and their strength is the strongest. But now... Jing Xingji also fell silent. She was right. In the face of profit, the person whom he chose to trade with had to be strong enough. Otherwise, even if others were to covet him, he wouldn't be able to protect himself. As for the underground palace, it's even more impossible to leave. That soul formation refined corpse outside is too dangerous. Even if it was as perfected Yuanmu had guessed, that the Ghost Square Demon Lord had obtained the Essence Demon Stone Steel and absorbed the Essence Demon Chi here, he was still a human. If they met, they could still negotiate. However, the refined corpse outside was a dead object. There was no reason to negotiate. Besides, as long as he was conscious, the Phantom Square Demon Lord would not stay here forever. Jing Xingji's eyes flashed, and he finally asked, then do you want to stay here? Once the passageway to the Immortal Palace is closed, it cannot be opened again. You said it yourself. At that time, he would be trapped in the Immortal Palace. So what if he advanced to the nascent soul stage? What if Qin Shoujing wakes up? You're still so young. Are you going to waste your remaining lifespan here? If you can't leave, what's the difference between dying and not being able to leave? I don't know. Mo Tienge rubbed the space between her eyebrows tiredly. She lowered her head to look at Qin Shi's ignorant face. If I go out, I'll die. I can only choose to live now. If there was a way out, why would she choose this way? Because of Qin Shi's arrival, she no longer needed to rely on Julian's sect to trade with them. On the other hand, if it wasn't for Qin Shi and Julian's sect wanted to take the Vermilion Bird Bow, she certainly wouldn't have gotten involved, and she wouldn't have fallen out with Julian's sect. Fu Yaozi had already planned for her. She would give up some benefits in exchange for the protection of these late nascent soul cultivators. She would get what she wanted as long as they could tolerate it. Unfortunately, her plans didn't change quickly. She had already taken another path. Even if she behaved humbly now, those late nascent soul cultivators wouldn't tolerate it. Time passed bit by bit, but Jing Xingji still didn't say anything. He just stood there, neither saying he would leave nor saying he would stay. Fellow Daoist Jing. After a moment of hesitation, Mo Tienge took out the Qinkuan ring from inside her robe and tossed it to him. You haven't obtained any benefits from our cooperation this time, but you've been dragged into trouble. This is our harvest this time. Since I won't leave, I'll give it to you. Jing Xingji took the ring and was stunned. This Qinkuan ring was naturally the one he got from Master Daoist Yuanmu just now. He knew very well how valuable it was. Although Qinkuan rings were extremely precious and could only be possessed by high-level cultivators in the Middle Ages, they were only storage-type magic weapons in the end. The most valuable thing was the crystal jades inside. If one appeared in a high-level cultivator's trade fair, it would cause a commotion, let alone there were so many of them here. This Qianquan ring was much richer than his entire net worth. He knew Qin Shoujing, as the Grand Supreme Elder of Xianqing School, would only have more wealth than him, but it also wouldn't surpass this Qianquan ring. What he didn't know was that the two of them previously obtained a deification cultivator's Qianquan ring, which contained a lot more things than this one. Besides, Qin Shi was unconscious now and they didn't know whether he could hold on or not, so how could Mo Tiange be in the mood to divide the loot? Do you know how much wealth is in this? Jing Xingji asked, are you really going to give it all to me? Mo Tiange chuckled softly. I'm already giving you things, yet you're still talking so much nonsense. She paused for a moment then took out a blank jade slip from her Qianquan bag. She recorded something then threw it to him. This is the way out. Take it and leave quickly. If you delay any longer, you might not be able to leave. The devil aura outside almost disappeared. Jing Xingji looked down at the Qianquan ring in his palm and finally clenched it. All right, take care. Mo Tiange nodded then said faintly, see you later. See you, later. He spat out the last two words with some difficulty. He took a deep look at them for the last time then finally turned around and left without looking back. When Jing Xingji's figure disappeared, Mo Tiange held Qin Shi in her arms and stared blankly at the empty hall. After a long time, she once again heaved a long sigh. She didn't know whether this was the right choice or not, but she knew she absolutely couldn't leave the underground palace now. The reason was exactly what Jing Xingji said just now. She and Qin Shi had treasures on them, so without martial strength, they would inevitably become targets for others to kill. Moreover, they couldn't pass through the passage to the Immortal Palace. There was a deification refined corpse above, so the Immortal Palace wasn't as safe as this underground palace. As for the future, she could only take it one step at a time. Girl, why are you doing this? Fu Yaozi's sigh rang in her mind. Mo Tiange was slightly startled, but she soon smiled and said, Master, you're awake. As time passed, Fu Yaozi's divine sense became weaker and weaker, and he had to rest longer and longer. Fu Yaozi said, if you give up on your senior martial brother, you can definitely go out with that sword cultivator boy. Since he has the ability to pass through the passage to the Immortal Palace alone, plus the life-saving technique Master taught you, you won't be a problem. Mo Tiange shook her head. I never thought about giving up on senior martial brother. Looking at Qin Shi's calm face, she said, senior martial brother never gave up on me, and I also won't give up on him. He had saved her too many times. When she was in the aura refining realm, she was ignorant and caused trouble. She was chased by people from Yunwu's sect, but it was him who arrived in time. When she was building her foundation, she mistakenly entered Zhong Muling's illusory sky formation. It was also him who rushed over regardless of the dangers. When she was forming her gold core, on Demonic Mountain, he would rather face danger alone to protect her. This time, she went to Yunzhong and couldn't go back. It was him who didn't hesitate to cross the South Sea to find her. Maybe at first, it was only because of responsibility, but with so much affection, she couldn't let him down. She never wanted to let him down. If she gave up on him, so what if she left the Immortal Palace? Although her goal was the Great Tao, she would never go against her heart. After a long silence, Fu Yaozi said, sure enough, I didn't choose the wrong person. If you give up, you won't be worthy of me passing on my mantle to you. Mo Tiange just smiled and didn't say anything after being praised. She didn't know the extent of the injury to Qin Shi's dantian, but it didn't mean she couldn't do anything. She took out a 9 Revolutions Yang restoration pill from her Qianquan bag and fed it to him. Then, she helped him up and transferred her Yin spiritual aura to him. As long as his dantian was preserved, he could keep his cultivation level and have a chance to wake up. Now, she transferred her spiritual aura to him first, letting the yin spiritual aura combine with the yang spiritual aura in his body. That way, they could form a cycle and slowly repair his dantian. As for the extent of the repair, that would depend on heaven's will. Time passed slowly, but the underground palace was still quiet. Even the original devil disappeared without a trace. Guifang Devil Monarch and his disciple were nowhere to be seen. After a long time, Mo Tiange finally stopped healing. She tiredly wiped the sweat on her forehead. Just now, she blocked the rebound of the vermilion bird's divine power for Qin Shi. Then, she was affected by the spiritual aura pressure of the 4 nascent soul cultivators fighting, causing her spiritual aura to be in disorder. Her current state wasn't very good, so this was all she could do. She checked Qin Shi's condition. Seeing that his complexion wasn't as unsightly as before and that the spiritual aura inside his body seemed to have increased, she heaved a sigh of relief. She planned to rest for a while, then enter the virtual sky world to recuperate. Even if she was trapped here, it didn't mean she had given up her pursuit of the great Tao. She had to heal her injuries and cultivate. After the spiritual aura inside her body calmed down, she held Qin Shi and was about to enter the virtual sky world when her divine sense sensed someone approaching. Chapter 490. At this time, the passage to the Immortal Palace was about to close, so everyone should be rushing to leave. Why was there still someone here? Mo Tiange was about to enter the virtual sky world when she sensed a strong sword intent from this person. A thought flashed in her mind. She stopped summoning the virtual sky world and turned to look. "I'm back," the person said weakly and showed her a bitter smile. Mo Tiange was stunned. "You? Why didn't you leave?" He said they'd meet again, but he didn't have to be so fast, right? Alas. The person heaved a long sigh. Who else could it be but Jing Xingji? He must have been gone for a long time, right? According to the map she gave him, he should have left the passage to the Immortal Palace. Why did he come back? Mo Tiange was very confused. Jing Xingji spread his hands and said, "It seems I'm destined to stay here with you too. What's going on?" Mo Tiange was confused. Without her and Qin Shi dragging him down, with Jing Xingji's ability, it shouldn't be difficult for him to leave the passage, right? Why did he come back? Jing Xingji sighed deeply. Fatigue appeared on his face as he tossed something over to her. Mo Tiange caught it. It was the interspatial ring. Jing Xingji said, "Although I'm cruel and merciless, I never break my promise. I cooperate with others, but I won't take the spoils for myself. This time, I suffered because of you, so I took all the high-grade spirit stones and most of the crystal jades inside as compensation. This is yours." Although the universe ring was rare, it was just a storage magic treasure after all. For him, high-grade spirit stones and crystal jades were more practical, as they could help him cultivate. Among them, the crystal jades could also be embedded into his life-flying sword, which was much more effective than the crystal soul jade. After refining them, the power of the flying sword would increase greatly. Jing Xingji was stunned at this thought. If he couldn't get out and was locked in this immortal palace for the rest of his life, what would the power of his flying sword matter? When he left the celestial pole, he thought that if he became a venerable sword in the late stage of the nascent soul realm one day, he must return to the celestial pole and Gujin sect to take back what belonged to him and his master. Therefore, although he became an individual cultivator and wandered around, he never gave up on himself. But now, when he came back, the idea of revenge never crossed his mind. In the end, he smiled bitterly. Forget it. It wasn't that he didn't want to go out. Who asked him to be so unlucky to meet these two nemeses? Mo Tiange held the Qiankuan ring and stared at Jing Xingji, waiting for his explanation. Jing Xingji sighed again. He had sighed more today than he had in the past few hundred years. In the next moment, he frowned and spat out a mouthful of blood. Daoist Jing. Jing Xingji fell to the ground and carelessly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He smiled at her. Do you understand now? It's not that I don't want to leave, but I can't. You. Mo Tiange's gaze was complicated as she asked in a low voice, who are you? Of course it's those two from the Juyan sect. Jing Xingji said faintly, I met them again in front of the Immortal Palace's passageway. That mid-stage nascent soul realm cultivator has been recuperating up there and hasn't come down yet. One of them is in the middle stage, and the other is in the late stage. I can only run for my life. Mo Tiange was speechless for a long time. Just now, Master Daoist Iron Mask didn't attack them because he was alone and he had to take Master Daoist Yuanmu and Ling Yunhe into consideration. If they left this place and met up with Ling Xiyu and ran into Jing Xingji again, they would naturally vent their anger on him. Although Jing Xingji was powerful, he was only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. When he was besieged by a mid-stage cultivator and a late-stage cultivator, he could only flee. Mo Tiange didn't feel too guilty about this. Jing Xingji chose to cooperate with them, so he naturally had to bear the risks. But in any case, his inability to leave was related to the two of them. The most important thing was that the three of them were now in the same boat. The passageway to the Immortal Palace was about to close, and they didn't have the strength to go out. After a long time, Mo Tiange also sighed. She took out a bottle of medicinal pills from her Qiankuan bag and threw it to him. There's no other way. Recuperate first. Jing Xingji took it, opened the jade bottle and sniffed it. His eyes brightened. You really have a lot of good things. You even have 9 transformations yang return pill. Right, Qin Shoujing's pill concocting skills aren't bad, and he's rich, so he naturally used whatever was useful. He poured out a pill and swallowed it. After thinking for a while, he carefully put the whole bottle of medicinal pills into his robe and said, It's mine. In any case, you're also somewhat responsible for me not being able to leave, so I'll take some compensation first. Mo Tiange didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was really, quickly recuperate. Stop talking nonsense. Although these medicinal pills were precious, they didn't lack spiritual plants and could concoct them at any time, so giving him a bottle was nothing. However, this was troublesome. With other people here, how could she enter the virtual sky world? After thinking for a while, she shook her head helplessly. Forget it. The devil aura in this sacrificial temple was already gone, and it was full of spiritual aura. There was also the remnant vermilion bird's breath, so it wasn't much worse than the virtual sky world. In any case, she still had a lot of medicinal pills, so she could just recuperate here. As for the future, if she really couldn't get out, there would always be opportunities. With that thought in mind, she took out a piece of demonic beast skin from her Qiankuan bag and helped Qin Shi settle down. She also swallowed a medicinal pill, then sat cross-legged to adjust her breath. In order to heal Qin Shi, Mo Tiange almost used up all the spiritual aura in her body. This adjustment took almost a day and a night. When she opened her eyes, Jing Xingji was no longer there. The passage to the Immortal Palace was closed, so presumably, there was no one else. Maybe he went outside to take a walk. They didn't know how long they would stay here, so it was good for him to familiarize himself with the environment. Mo Tiange thought for a while and took advantage of Jing Xingji's absence to take Qin Shi into the virtual sky world. As soon as she entered, she released Xiaohua and Xiaofan. They wouldn't fight, so they could continue cultivating in the virtual sky world. As for Feifei, it was useful outside. Seeing Xiaofan, she couldn't help but remember her promise to the Sea Dragon clan. If one day she passed away or if she was fated to advance to the deification realm, she would terminate the spiritual beast contract and let it go back to the Eastern Sea. Now that she was locked in this immortal palace, she didn't know whether she could still keep her promise. She shook her head and put this matter at the back of her mind. She would try her best to fulfill her promise, but she obviously couldn't now. Soon after, she packed up some things and took Qin-Shi out of the virtual sky world, returning to the Vermilion Bird main hall. There were no other buildings in this underground palace except for this sacrificial temple. Although the spiritual aura inside was abundant, it was too gloomy. If there was a chance, she still had to go upstairs. But she couldn't do it in the short term because that deification realm refined corpse was still wandering above. With that thought in mind, Mo Tiange took things out of her Qinquan bag one by one. Before long, Jing Xingji came back. His steps were light and he was in good spirits. Apparently, his injuries had recovered well. When he saw Mo Tiange, he was stunned for a long time before he pointed at the things around her and asked, I can't leave for the time being, so I have to live more comfortably, right? Mo Tiange glanced at him and calmly poured herself a cup of tea. She arranged a small cultivation room in a corner of the main hall. In the innermost part was a bamboo bed covered with a piece of soft animal skin, where Qin-Shi was placed. Next to him was another piece of animal skin with a praying mat on top of it, which was her place to cultivate. In front of her was a tea table with a small tea stove on the side. In the outermost part, there was a row of short tables with all kinds of books on them. They were both decorations and partitions. Jing Xingji was amazed and shook his head. Women will always be women, Mo Tiange pointed at the other side of the Vermilion Bird statue. That side is yours. We won't disturb each other. With the statue and the sacrificial table as a partition, they wouldn't be able to see each other at a glance and would have some private space. Jing Xingji glanced at them but didn't say anything. He walked towards her and said, I just walked around the entire underground palace. Mo Tiange pushed out another praying mat and let him sit on the opposite side of the tea table. She asked, What did you find? Jing Xingji hesitated for a while and said, Someone didn't go out like us. What? Mo Tiange was surprised, but she soon frowned. Could it be that Guifang Devil Monarch? They couldn't go out because their strength was limited, but other people didn't have this problem, right? Jing Xingji nodded at first but then shook his head. Yes and no. What do you mean? That Guifang Devil Monarch has died, Jing Xingji said. Mo Tiange was shocked. What? Although she had guessed it, she never believed that the Devil Monarch who could compete with revered Wu Ming had died just like that. She couldn't help but think of Guifang City, the evaluation the devil cultivators in the city had of Guifang Devil Monarch, and his secret scheme of obtaining the Heavenly Devil Tower. Although he didn't have much time left in his lifespan, dying just like that was really hard to believe. What did you see? You said there was an original devil steel here and it was the source of the devil aura from before, right? Mo Tiange nodded. When she first entered the underground palace, she said that to Jing Xingji. I just walked around the underground palace and found that steel. And then? Mo Tiange asked. Could it be that Guifang Devil Monarch couldn't absorb that much original devil aura, so his body exploded and he died? Guifang Devil Monarch died next to that steel, Jing Xingji said, but there's still one person alive. Mo Tiange was stunned and blurted out, Yang Qingji. Yes, it's him, Jing Xingji said. Right now, his whole body is covered in devil aura, and there are countless devils scattered around him. However, the devil aura of these devils has all disappeared, and they've become dead things. Mo Tiange's expression changed. Could it be that the one who cultivated the great primordial devil technique and absorbed the devil aura here was him? Great primordial devil technique? Jing Xingji asked. Mo Tiange nodded slowly. Yes, a top-notch devil path cultivation technique is recorded on that stele. It's the great primordial devil technique. Jing Xingji frowned and thought about it, but in the end, he couldn't figure it out and shook his head. Aside from that time on Demonic Mountain, he didn't have any contact with Master Song Feng, so he didn't know that Master Song Feng cultivated the great primordial devil technique, so he didn't know what kind of devil technique it was. I don't know what the great primordial devil technique is, Jing Xingji said. When I saw that boy practicing devil technique, I wanted to kill him with my sword. But on second thought, the passage to the Immortal Palace has disappeared, so it's good to have one more person. Maybe he'll be of help when we find a way out. Fortunately, you didn't kill him. Mo Tiange breathed a sigh of relief. She and Yang Qingji could be considered old acquaintances, and he was a decent person. After thinking for a while, she frowned again. How did Guifang Devil Monarch die? Since he died, why is Yang Qingji still alive? I don't know about that, Jing Xingji said. Guifang Devil Monarch died next to Yang Qingji, and he seemed to be a Dharma protector. I guess he probably died to protect his disciple. Chapter 491. Mo Tiange fell into contemplation. They originally guessed that Ghost Square Demon Monarch absorbed the primordial devil aura, but they didn't expect him to die, and the person who cultivated the primordial devil art was Yang Qingji. Yang Qingji was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm now. Even if he absorbed the primordial devil aura, he couldn't advance immediately, so he couldn't get out. This is going to be fun. Mo Tiange shook her head and sighed. I thought we were unlucky enough, but I didn't expect someone else would be unlucky as well. Let's not talk about this first. Jing Xingji asked, are you familiar with this person? Is he reliable? If I have a grudge against him, I'll kill him to avoid future troubles. That's not necessary. Mo Tiange shook her head. Although I don't have a deep friendship with him, we cooperated once. He's a good partner. Now that he can't get out and there's no conflict of interest between us, we can live in harmony. Maybe we can even work together to get out. Jing Xingji thought about it and agreed. But we can't be careless. If he wakes up, I've prepared for it. Mo Tiange smiled and pointed around the hall. It's hard for ordinary people to notice this defensive formation. If he finds this place, it'll warn us. Jing Xingji didn't notice it just now, so he couldn't help but exclaim, your attainments in formations are really good. Mo Tiange just smiled bitterly and didn't answer. No matter how good her attainments in formations were, they couldn't exceed her realm by too much. She couldn't do anything about the ancient restrictions around this immortal palace. Jing Xingji turned to look at Qin Shi and asked, how is he? Mo Tiange put away her melancholy, knelt up, and pulled Qin Shi's fur. I don't know. I can only feed him healing pills every few days, hoping it can slowly heal the injury in his dantian. Jing Xingji frowned. If Qin Shi's sea of knowledge was closed, he couldn't cultivate. If his body was full of spiritual aura, this method would work. However, his spiritual aura was almost empty, so it was hard to say whether this method would be effective or not. Medicinal pills also needed to be refined with spiritual aura to release their medicinal effects. Otherwise, most of the medicinal effects would be wasted. He reached out to check Qin Shi's pulse. After a while, a surprised expression appeared on his face. Where did the spiritual aura in his body come from? Due to the gap in their cultivation levels, Mo Tiange couldn't clearly probe Qin Shi's situation. At that moment, she asked with concern, how is he? Jing Xingji said, a day ago, the spiritual aura inside his body was almost empty. But now, there's weak spiritual aura circulating. After examining for a while, he said with certainty, "That's right, this spiritual aura is circulating on its own." How strange, could it be that his sea of consciousness was not closed? That's not it. Jing Xingji was puzzled no matter how he thought about it, but Mo Tiange's spirit was greatly aroused. She naturally knew the reason. The two of them no longer had pure yin and yang constitutions. She cultivated the origin, while Qin she cultivated the three primordial cycles. Both of them had the concept of endless cycles. There was residual spiritual aura inside Qin Shi's body. After Mo Tiange poured her own spiritual aura into his body, the yin and yang aura automatically formed a cycle, which was why this happened. Since there was a small cycle inside his body, the spiritual aura wouldn't completely disperse. As long as she replenished his spiritual aura from time to time, the medicinal power of the medicinal pills for healing could also be dissolved. In this way, as long as the medicinal pills continued, his dantian would be restored one day. Once his injuries were healed, the possibility of his sea of consciousness opening would be very high. For more than a day, although she tried her best to stay calm, deep in her heart, she was in a trance. She was confused about many things, so she couldn't concentrate. It was only now that she felt her mind was clear and full of vitality. "How's his dantian? Is it better?" This time, Jing Xingji took a long time to examine it. He answered, "Although it's not very obvious, it's a bit better than before." He paused for a moment then said, "There's something inside his dantian. It's very powerful, I can't get close to it." Jing Xingji then turned to look at her, seemingly waiting for her to explain. Mo Tiange knew this should be the yang spiritual bead. However, it wasn't good for her to explain it to others, so she said, "Years ago, he had a fated chance and obtained a treasure. This thing was refined in his dantian, so it can contain a lot of spiritual aura. Presumably, the thing that absorbed the vermilion bird's breath just now was this thing." "I see." He never understood why Qin Shi absorbed the vermilion bird's breath completely, causing the vermilion bird bow to also become his. Now that Mo Tiange said this, he finally understood what happened. However, both the vermilion bird's breath and the vermilion bird bow were absorbed by this thing. Does this mean it recognizes him as its master? How could Mo Tiange answer this question? This was also her first time seeing a psychic magic weapon. Jing Xingji also didn't expect to get an answer from her. He thought for a moment then said with a smile, "This time, Qin Shoujing really profited from a disaster. Many cultivators can't even see a psychic magic weapon in their entire lives." Mo Tiange heard the jealousy in his words and couldn't help but laugh. Even if he obtained the vermilion bird bow, what's the use? We're trapped here now, and I don't know when we'll be able to leave. That's not necessarily true, Jing Xingji said. Don't you know the secret technique to open the passage to Immortal Palace? It's just that no one can use it. Right now, there are 4 living people in this Immortal Palace, you, me, Qin Shoujing, and that devil cultivator boy. If we all cultivate to the nascent soul realm, why are you looking at me like that? Mo Tiange said, I want to see whether you can read minds or not. Jing Xingji was speechless for a while. So, you've already thought about this matter? Mo Tiange nodded. You're right, but not completely right. I can indeed learn that secret technique from that senior, but the power needed to open the passage to Immortal Palace isn't ordinary. Previously, the spiritual aura provided by the other 4 late-stage nascent soul cultivators and my 5 senior martial brothers was enough to open the passage. If there were only 4 of us, we'd have to all advance to the late stage to realize it. All of us in the late stage. Disappointment flashed in Jing Xingji's eyes. Mo Tiange and Yang Qingji hadn't advanced to the nascent soul realm yet, and he himself had just advanced to the nascent soul realm not long ago. According to common sense, it would take at least several hundred years for him to advance to the late stage, let alone Qin Shoujing. Seeing his expression, Mo Tiange smiled. There's another way. What is it? Jing Xingji's hope was reignited. One of us can advance to the deification realm. As long as there's one deification cultivator, this secret technique can be used. Seeing Jing Xingji's expression, she laughed even more happily. What's with your expression? Saying it's useless. Jing Xingji rolled his eyes. Advancing to the deification realm was more difficult than advancing to the late stage of the nascent soul realm. But at least there's hope. She looked down at his sleeping face and said softly, as long as there's hope, we can't give up. Jing Xingji looked at her in silence for a long time and suddenly said in a deep voice, Mo Qingwei, now I know why Qin Shoujing chose you. Without waiting for Mo Tiange to speak, he stood up and walked to the other side of the statue. His voice was low. You two are very similar. You're really lucky to meet a person whose soul matches yours. After her initial communication with Jing Xingji, the two of them lived a life of occasional communication without disturbing each other. Usually, in addition to looking after Qin Shi, Mo Tiange studied cultivation techniques, and learned miscellaneous things. Occasionally, she would concoct medicinal pills and concoct healing medicinal pills for Qin Shi. She was worried about Qin Shi, so she stayed in the main hall and left Feifei to inquire about the situation and the surroundings. As for Jing Xingji, he casually took a praying mat from his Qianquan bag and threw it in the corner. He minded his own business, recuperated, and wandered around when he had nothing to do. As for Yang Qingji, he hadn't woken up yet. He was still in the stage of refining primordial devil aura. Feifei and Jing Xingji were very interested in him. They went to see him every day, reported to her when they came back, and guessed when he would stop cultivating. Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. Feifei was fine since it was a playful spiritual beast, but Jing Xingji also had this kind of personality. He was really different from when she first met him. A month passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, after feeding Qin Shi medicinal pills, Fu Yao's voice suddenly rang in her mind, which had been quiet for a long time. Girl. Mo Tiange was happy. Master, you haven't spoken for a long time. Fu Yao's voice sounded a little tired. Master. Master has rested for so long just for today. Mo Tiange was stunned. She suddenly realized something and was a little scared. Master, it seems you guessed it. Fu Yao's tone was still calm. Master's divine sense is about to dissipate. I'm afraid I can't accompany you. Master, why are you sad? Parting between life and death is a common thing in life. Besides, didn't you say Master's original body has long advanced to the deification realm? I don't know whether my original body is still alive or not. If it's already dead, it won't be a waste of my time in this world. If it's still alive, maybe we'll meet again. Mo Tiange resisted the urge to cry and said in a low voice, Yes, Master. Although they only got along for a few years, this master's wholehearted care and guidance made her feel long-lasting warmth in the lonely and helpless Yunzhong. Fu Yao's soft laughter rang in her mind. I don't know whether my original body has a disciple or not. If not, you're Master's only successor. After he finished speaking, his tone became serious and he said solemnly, Girl, listen. Although you're trapped here, it's not that there's no hope of getting out. You must not be depressed, understand? Yes, Master. Mo Tiange couldn't help but look serious. The space-staring technique to open this space was divided into 5 parts. Even if I teach it to you, you won't be able to use it. However, the method to open the Immortal Palace's restriction was secretly taught by me. I only borrowed the power of the other 4 people at the same time. This secret technique isn't trivial. I didn't have it for a long time, so I only have a rough understanding of it. Now, I'll teach it to you. Study it well and maybe you'll find a better way. Hearing this, Mo Tiange was a bit surprised. Master, so you're saying I don't need that much spiritual aura to open the Immortal Palace's restriction? Yes, everything depends on your talent. Fu Yao paused for a moment then said, before you master this secret technique, it's better to form your nascent soul here. This place is far away from the worldly affairs, and there are no disputes between cultivators. It's a good place for closed-door meditation. I'll teach you my soul formation experience so you can study it well. I understand, Master. Fu Yao was silent for a while then said, okay, sit cross-legged and concentrate your spirit and qi. Master will imprint everything I know into your sea of knowledge. Chapter 492. She calmed her mind, gathered her spirit and qi, emptied her consciousness, and let down her vigilance in her sea of knowledge. Then, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her head. Many things rushed into her mind, some turned into words, some turned into pictures. These things kept flashing in her mind until they were deeply engraved in her memory. Mo Tiange fell into a brief state of confusion. This process didn't take long. Mo Yaoqing used this method to pass the art of Sunu to her. At that time, she was still immortal, and her sea of knowledge couldn't bear such power, so she fainted for a long time. But now, she was a core formation cultivator. She was completely different from before, so she quickly woke up. Master. Mo Tiange called softly in her mind. But there was no response. Master. She was a little anxious, but there was still no sound in her mind. She picked up the Fuxing sword and found that there was no divine sense on it. She sat paralyzed on the praying mat and didn't recover for a long time. Fuxing Yao disappeared. Although she knew this day would come, she still couldn't help but feel sad and melancholy when he really disappeared. Master said if they were fated, they might meet again. But what were the chances of a cultivator from 100,000 years ago living until now even if he had advanced to the deification realm? Even if he really lived until now, where could she find him? It was just a comfort. What's wrong? On the other side, Jing Xingji stopped cultivating and was about to go out for a stroll, but he saw her sitting there with a tired expression. Mo Tiange shook her head gently. It's nothing. There are just some things I need to get used to. Jing Xingji stared at her for a while. He couldn't figure it out, so he didn't care and said, I'm going out for a walk. Do you want to let your little guy go with me? He was talking about Fei Fei. This human and beast had similar hobbies. These days, they often wandered around together and studied Yangqingji. Mo Tiange glanced at Fei Fei, who was curled up on the side to protect her. She sighed and said, it's up to you. If it wants to go, then go. When Fei Fei heard her voice, it raised its head, swung its golden tail, and jumped onto Jing Xingji's shoulder. Then we'll go first. Mo Tiange nodded absent-mindedly. Watching the human and beast disappear, Mo Tiange closed her eyes. Master, Master. The additional things in her mind made her feel very complicated. The secret technique that opened up the passage to the Immortal Palace was actually a set of array formation techniques called the Profound Void Cloud Formation. Before this, Fu Yaozi had already taught her the method of setting up the formation and the incantation to use it. Now, he was instilling the principles of setting up the formation into her mind. This formation consisted of a star chart and a 5-star formation. It required 5 mediums to inject powerful energy into the formation, and then activate the formation's power to shatter the void in one go. Of course, this so-called shattering the void and tearing space was actually very crude. It was not the true shattering of the void. Even in ancient times, the void-shattering technique could only be mastered by cultivators with great supernatural powers. The mystical cloud formation that Fu Yaozi knew about was created by a genius low-level cultivator in the ancient cultivation world, based on the void-shattering technique. The profound void cloud link formation required much less spiritual energy, but the space it created was also extremely unstable. Even so, in today's human world, this technique was already an amazing magical power. If it was spread out, those great cultivators would probably covet it. There were also the experiences of nascent soul formation, the cultivation method and strange techniques of the body of origin. This master she picked up halfway actually passed on all his secret techniques to her. Several years ago, she accidentally made the Fuxing sword recognize her as its master in Shi and gained Fu Yaozi's approval. In the past few years, this master taught her many things, but he only had one request that couldn't be called a request. But today, he passed on the secret techniques he spent his whole life studying to her, but he disappeared without a trace. Mo Tiange took a deep breath. Her eyes were slightly wet, and she told herself to cheer up. Since she received her master's inheritance, she should cultivate well and not let down her master's good intentions. Maybe one day, they would really meet again. Being trapped in the underground palace was very boring. Every day, she did the same thing. However, this was not a big deal. Who didn't go through lonely cultivation when they reached the core formation realm and nascent soul realm? Entering closed-door meditation for dozens of years was common. Being trapped in the underground palace was just changing a place to cultivate. For Mo Tiange, this kind of life wasn't too difficult. She took good care of him every day, and Qin Shi's injuries were improving. Probably in a year or two, his dantian would be restored to its original state. In this way, his cultivation would be preserved. As for when he would wake up, it was hard to say. Jing Xingji speculated that the reason why he closed his sea of knowledge was because the power of the vermilion bird's breath was too great and he couldn't bear it. As long as the yang spiritual bead in his body completely absorbed the breath, he should be able to wake up. These were all good news, which made Mo Tiange feel that even if she was trapped in the underground palace and couldn't go out, she was still full of hope. Compared to the more than 50 years of separation, Qin Shi was by her side now. He just couldn't wake up for a while, which was enough comfort. Mechanical puppets. Mo Tiange put the jade slip on the tea table, tapped the table lightly, and sank into contemplation. Before he left, Fu Yaozi told her to do closed-door meditation here, but after careful consideration, she felt it wasn't the right time. First, Qin Shi hadn't woken up, so she couldn't rest assured in this underground palace. Even if she entrusted him to Jing Xingji, it would still be the same. Second, it wasn't easy to find a safe place to do closed-door meditation, and if she wanted to enter the virtual sky world, she couldn't explain it to Jing Xingji. Third, if she wanted to do closed-door meditation, she would have to form her nascent soul. There were still a lot of things she had to prepare, so she had to settle everything and have nothing to worry about. With these considerations, she decided to wait for Qin Shi to wake up before considering closed-door meditation. She might as well use her spare time to study miscellaneous studies. Whether it was the mysterious void cloud connecting formation or Fu Yaozi's art of the origin, they were things that could only be comprehended by nascent soul cultivators. With her current realm, she still couldn't understand them. Therefore, Mo Tiange picked up the relic of an ancient deification cultivator, Introduction to Mechanisms. This introduction to mechanisms was easy to understand and didn't restrict one's realm. From making simple mechanisms at the beginning, to making elementary puppets at the end, there was a very detailed explanation. It was a good introductory book. If she could thoroughly understand this introduction to mechanisms, making simple puppets wouldn't be a problem. The so-called simple puppets, in the eyes of ancient cultivators, were enough to reach the core formation realm based on today's standards. With core formation puppets, she could do a lot more things. For example, in the Immortal Palace above the Underground Palace, because there was a deification realm refined corpse, they didn't dare to leave the Underground Palace rashly. Even if they left the Underground Palace, they still had to be on tenterhooks because there were some things they couldn't do. But if they had puppets, they could let the puppets go out of the Underground Palace on their behalf and search for treasures in the Immortal Palace. The puppets didn't have a human aura, so the refined corpse wouldn't attack them. Moreover, the cultivation level of the core formation realm wasn't low. As expected, the puppets were controlled by the crystal stones she saw in the ancient records of the virtual sky world. Of course, crystal jades and crystal soul jades could also be used. According to this jade slip, the difference between crystal jades, crystal stones, and crystal soul jades lay in the spiritual aura they could provide. Crystal jades were naturally the best. They contained a lot of spiritual aura and had a strong automatic recovery ability. Crystal jades were necessary to make high-level puppets because crystal stones and crystal soul jades weren't enough to provide the spiritual aura needed to control puppets. Ordinary puppets could use crystal stones. Compared to crystal jades, crystal stones weren't precious and were cheap. They just needed to be inlaid a bit more, so most puppets used crystal stones. As for crystal soul jades, because middle and high-level puppets needed too much spiritual aura, crystal soul jades were generally only used to practice with low-level puppets. After she finished reading this jade slip, Mo Tiange finally realized that the two foundation building puppets Wanderer Ziwei gave her were only for beginners to practice with. After the two puppets were broken, she took them apart and examined them. Sure enough, they were inlaid with crystal soul jades. If she wanted to learn the art of mechanisms, there were many materials related to the art of mechanisms in this ancient cultivator's Qiankuan ring. In addition, when she just formed her gold core, she exchanged a large amount of crystal soul jades in Kuanzhong City, so it was just right for her to practice. Taking advantage of Jing Xingji's absence, Mo Tiange cleaned up the things in the two Qiankuan rings. She put all the materials related to the art of mechanisms into a Qiankuan bag and started to study them. She had always been serious about her work. Every day, aside from her fixed cultivation time, she spent almost all her time comprehending the art of mechanisms. Soon, she made the first batch of finished products. Jing Xingji was very interested in this. Since he had nothing to do, he squatted beside her with Fei and watched her make the puppets. Mo Tiange didn't have any intention of hiding anything. If he wanted to watch, she'd let him watch. It would be best if she could help him. Unfortunately, Jing Xingji obviously wasn't interested in miscellaneous knowledge. In the beginning, he was very excited, but after 2 days, he only watched and didn't do anything. A month later, Mo Tiange made the first batch of puppets. This batch of puppets only had the cultivation level of the peak stage of the aura refining realm, but it was a good start. After she used her divine sense to place restrictions on the puppets, she directed them to leave the underground palace. With the strength of her divine sense now, this wasn't difficult. However, the Immortal Palace was very big, and these puppets were too weak, so they couldn't go too far. Half a day later, these aura-refining puppets brought back some withered spiritual plants, which made Mo Tiange overjoyed. This meant that her plan was feasible. If she could create a core formation stage puppet, she would be able to do even more things. Mo Tiange immersed herself in studying how to make puppets. Several months passed in a flash. During this time, Qin Shi's injuries were getting better. His dantian was no longer a hindrance, so he only needed to rest. With the 9 transformations yang restoration pill, Jing Xingji's injuries healed very quickly. These days, he no longer just meditated and strolled around. He began to find a quiet place to practice his swordsmanship. As for Feifei, it often slipped out of the underground palace and strolled above. Feifei's behavior worried Mo Tiange. Although it had the ability to coexist peacefully with spiritual beasts, refined corpses weren't living creatures, so they weren't affected. Feifei didn't care at all and said it could handle it. Since it was so confident, Mo Tiange didn't say anything. Feifei wasn't an ordinary spiritual beast. After all, it was a divine beast, so it always had something special about it. As for young Qingji, he still hadn't woken up. Chapter 493. You're still messing around with your lousy toys. Jing Xingji, who found a place to hide and practice swordsmanship, said to Mo Tiange when he saw the junk in the corner of the vermilion bird main hole. Mo Tiange didn't raise her head and continued to assemble the puppets. The materials of these puppets came from ancient cultivators, so they were extremely sturdy. She spent a lot of effort to make these parts. Whether they're lousy toys or not, you'll know when the time comes, she said casually. From beginning to end, Jing Xingji didn't believe that she could make core formation puppets. The so-called art of puppets and mechanisms had truly disappeared for too long. It had been so long that no one in the cultivation world today believed in its existence. However, it didn't matter whether other people believed it or not, it was enough as long as she believed it herself. Jing Xingji was afraid that when the time came to make the core formation puppets, he would regret it. There were a lot of good things in this immortal palace. Jing Xingji shrugged and planned to go back to his corner to meditate for a while. Although sword cultivators mainly practiced swordsmanship, they weren't martial artists in the secular world. The strength of their spiritual aura directly affected the power of their swordsmanship. Therefore, in addition to practicing swordsmanship, meditation was also indispensable. Because of this, sword cultivators often had a harder time making realms than other cultivators. They had to practice swordsmanship, but they couldn't fall behind in their spiritual aura cultivation, so they had to spend a lot more time than ordinary cultivators. Sword cultivators like Jing Xingji who formed their nascent soul at the age of nearly 300 could be said to be as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Without extraordinary talent and fated chances, it was simply impossible to achieve this. Therefore, although Jing Xingji always felt he was unlucky, when it came to fated chances, he didn't lose to others. How many sword cultivators in the world could encounter an ancient immortal's mansion in the foundation building realm and obtain an ancient cultivation sword and its accompanying cultivation method? The sword he obtained back then wasn't inferior to Qin Shi's 3-yang real fire sword, it just lacked a yang spiritual bead. Jing Xingji was about to go back to meditate when he suddenly saw something out of the corner of his eye. He looked back and was shocked. What's going on? Mo Tiange heard his shout and looked up. What? Look! Jing Xingji pointed at the corner next to her, where Qin Shi was lying. Mo Tiange turned to look and was also shocked. Qin Shi was still lying unconscious, but there was a faint fiery light lingering around his body. Mo Tiange put down the puppet in her hand then hastily approached him. She reached out and touched him. Although it was called a flame, it wasn't a real flame. There was only a faint red glow coming from Qin Shi's body. Jing Xingji walked closer. Let me see. He grasped Qin Shi's pulse and was just about to pour his spiritual aura into Qin Shi's body, but in the next moment, a strong momentum suddenly burst out from Qin Shi's body, abruptly pushing him away. How could this be? Jing Xingji was dumbfounded for a long time. He was already a nascent soul cultivator, how could he be casually lifted? However, that aura just now could not be faked. What's wrong? Mo Tiange asked with a grave expression. Jing Xingji got up and sat down on the praying mat at the side. He said, "There's a very powerful force inside his body that's blocking my spiritual energy." Emotienga was baffled. If Qin was clear-headed, he might have counterattacked automatically, but in that case, his strength definitely wouldn't be enough to push Jing Xingji away. After all, they were both nascent soul cultivators. Now that his sea of consciousness was closed, he was unable to adjust his breathing and cultivate. Logically speaking, such a situation should not have happened. While the two of them were puzzled, the fire on Qin's body became brighter and brighter. The fiery red light penetrated his body. Even his skin became a transparent red, and she could vaguely see a fiery aura flowing in his meridians. Emotienga reached out to touch him and felt even more baffled. Aside from the fire inside his body, Qin was completely normal. His breathing was long and steady, and his pulse was stable. He was no different from sleeping. Even so, what exactly was this thing? Would there be danger later? The two of them stared at each other blankly for a while. Jing Xingji suddenly said, "Don't you feel that the vermilion bird's breath has become stronger again?" This hall was originally the place where the vermilion bird bow was enshrined, and it was also the place where the vermilion bird's breath was the strongest. Even though the vermilion bird bow had been absorbed into Qin's body, the remaining vermilion bird's breath was still strong. Upon hearing what Jing Xingji said, Emotienga indeed felt that it seemed to have become a bit hot. Cultivators were immune to cold and heat, let alone she was a core formation cultivator. If even she felt a bit hot, it was clear to what extent this heat had reached. She turned to look at Qin and found that the red light on his body was becoming stronger and stronger. It almost dyed his whole body red. Could it be? Her expression changed slightly. Without the vermilion bird bow, the vermilion bird's breath had no source. Now that Qin was in this kind of situation, the source of the vermilion bird's breath was naturally his body. What did this mean? The vermilion bird's breath wasn't completely absorbed by the yang spiritual bead, so it was released? Then what about the vermilion bird's bow? There was such a strong vermilion bird's breath on this spirit-connected magic weapon. If the yang spiritual bead couldn't absorb it, would Qin's body explode with spiritual aura because of this? Emotienga's expression kept changing. This situation was beyond her knowledge. Even Jing Xingji couldn't help her. If it was, she had to quickly disperse the excess vermilion bird's breath, but if it wasn't, the biggest problem now was that she and Jing Xingji didn't know what was going on, so they couldn't deal with it. If they rashly took measures, they might end up making a fool of themselves. She couldn't use her spiritual aura to investigate the situation inside his body, and he didn't have any special characteristics on his body. Emotienga clenched her teeth and said, "How about I give him a diamond pill to protect his body?" Jing Xingji hesitated for a moment but didn't object. What she said was reasonable. If he protected his body and meridians, even if the vermilion bird's breath really overflowed, he could still hold on for a while. Emotienga took out a jade bottle from her Qianquan bag, poured out a diamond pill, and was about to feed it to Qin. This diamond pill was a high-level medicinal pill for body cultivators. It was specially used to temper the body. In the cultivation world, body cultivators were rare, so this medicinal pill was also very rare. If Qin hadn't been cultivating body refining techniques, he wouldn't have concocted this kind of medicinal pill. "Don't feed him." A delicate voice rang in her mind. Emotienga stopped and looked at Feifei, who was lazily wagging its tail. Feifei glanced at Jing Xingji, then jumped on the tea table and said with divine comprehension, "He's accepting the vermilion bird's breath to temper his body. If you feed him a diamond pill, he'll suffer a bit more, and the difficulty will be higher. Do you know what's going on? In any case, I'm a divine beast." Feifei curled its lips and lay down to comb its golden fur. The vermilion bird's breath contains powerful vermilion bird divine power. If you want to use it, you have to accept its test. Originally, with his cultivation level, it was impossible for him to pass the test, but who told him to be so lucky? Luck? Yes. If it weren't for that guy who cultivates the ice and fire arts dispelling the Vermilion Bird's breath's evil aura that day, he wouldn't have been able to endure it. You guys said that when he tried to take the Vermilion Bird bow, he was also bounced off, right? Although Feifei wasn't there that day, it had been crouching next to them these days. Occasionally, when Jing Xingji talked to her about this matter, it didn't avoid it, so it knew about this matter very clearly. You mean, the reason why he could survive that day was because of Lingyan? That's right. The Vermilion Bird guards the south. It's the essence of leaf fire and symbolizes light and vitality. Among the 4 symbols, although the Vermilion Bird isn't as ruthless as the fierce white tiger, its destructive power is the strongest, so it's born with evil aura. According to you guys, that guy cultivates the ice and fire arts, and it happened to dispel the Vermilion Bird's breath's evil aura, so he had a fated chance. Feifei scratched its head and said disdainfully, otherwise, how could a nascent soul cultivator like him obtain the inheritance of the Vermilion Bird's breath? Those people were also stupid. Even if he cultivates the ice and fire arts, what's the big deal in the core formation realm? In the distant past era, void refinement and body integration great cultivators didn't dare to directly face the divine beast's breath. Mo Tiange was speechless for a while, then asked, then what's the situation now? What's the hurry? Listen to me slowly. In any case, you can't help now. Looking at Feifei's lazy appearance, Mo Tiange sighed. Who's the master here? But although she was dissatisfied, she still put away the Vajra pills. Seeing that she didn't speak for a long time and finally put away the medicinal pills, Jing Xingji asked, what's wrong? Mo Tiange shook her head. I'll tell you later. Under normal circumstances, in the current human world, it's impossible for anyone to pass the test of the Vermilion Bird's breath and become the Vermilion Bird bow's master. However, doesn't he have a young spiritual bead in his body? Even in the distant past era, this kind of miraculous object was a rare treasure. The power of the Vermilion Bird's breath was too great, so it stimulated the young spiritual bead and completely absorbed it. The Vermilion Bird's breath was trapped in the young spiritual bead, so its power was greatly reduced. That's why he survived. The young spiritual bead has long merged with him, and their breaths are the same. The Vermilion Bird bow and the Vermilion Bird's breath are constantly assimilated in the young spiritual bead, which is equivalent to recognizing him as its master. After a pause, Feifei said with a bit of reluctance, all right, his own breath is also very suitable. Pure young body, leaf fire aspect, and the Vermilion Bird bow. Leaf fire aspect. She was aware that she had always been cultivating with fire element cultivation techniques, but what was the departing fire aspect? Did you forget his nascent soul celestial phenomenon? Mo Tiange was slightly stunned. She remembered the phoenix celestial phenomenon that appeared in the sky when they left Demonic Mountain that day. This matter even caused a sensation in the celestial pole. Phoenix is the Vermilion Bird. In fact, the Vermilion Bird is the noblest bloodline among the phoenixes. The human world is too chaotic now. You can't even distinguish the bloodline of a divine beast. Of course. Divine beasts were too far away from them. They hadn't even seen a living creature, so how could they distinguish bloodlines? His nascent soul celestial phenomenon is a phoenix, which shows that he has the leaf fire aspect, and the Vermilion Bird is the essence of leaf fire, so they naturally match. What about now? Mo Tiange glanced at Qin Shi with a bit of worry. The flames on his body were burning fiercely. Will he be in danger? Probably not. The dangerous time has passed, Feifei said. Feifei said, after the young spiritual beads absorbed the Vermilion Bird's breath, they began to compete with each other. From the looks of it now, the young spiritual beads must have assimilated the vermilion bird's breath, so they released the vermilion bird's breath to transform his body. Tiange was stunned for a while. So, in the past half a year or so, he's actually been in danger. Yes. Fei Fei was a bit happy to see her like this. You just realized. If the young spiritual bead didn't assimilate the vermilion bird's breath, even if his Dantian's injury was healed, it would have destroyed him in an instant. Tiange touched her chest and glanced at Qin Shi. Fortunately, the danger has passed. After scaring her, Fei Fei seemed to have found her conscience, so she comforted her. You don't have to worry. This is a good thing. After being tempered by the vermilion bird's breath, there will be fewer things that can hurt him in the future. Moreover, his real fire will become the vermilion bird's flame, which is more advanced than any heavenly fire or earthly fire. Even Samadhi real fire is inferior to it. Chapter 494. He's being tempered by the vermilion bird's breath, Tiange said to Jing Xingji after learning what happened from Fei Fei. Jing Xingji was puzzled. How do you know? Tiange paused for a moment. Fei Fei's ability to speak was indeed a bit surprising. In the current cultivation world, 8th-rank demonic beasts only began to develop spiritual wisdom and could speak after learning. Fei Fei was only a 5th-rank spiritual beast, but its spiritual wisdom wasn't inferior to that of humans. If this was known by others, Fei Fei would probably become a treasure coveted by everyone. Although Jing Xingji could be considered a trustworthy person in this immortal palace, this kind of thing, just trust me. In the end, Tiange didn't say it clearly. Fei Fei never spoke in front of Jing Xingji and only communicated with her using its divine comprehension, probably because it didn't want others to know. Jing Xingji didn't ask anymore and turned to pay attention to Qin Shi's condition. He had been in the cultivation world for many years, so he knew he had to learn to keep his mouth shut when he shouldn't ask too many questions. The two of them just stood there, watching Qin Shi being surrounded by the vermilion bird's breath again and slowly going through the process of body tempering. This process lasted for a full 3 days. At first, Jing Xingji was very concerned, but later, he became impatient. When he heard Tiange said there was no danger, he returned to his previous habits and continued to meditate, practice swordsmanship, and go out for a walk every day. On the 3rd day, Tiange saw that the flames on Qin Shi's body were getting weaker and weaker, but his face was getting redder and redder. She knew the body tempering process was about to be completed and was overjoyed. In this dim underground palace, although she lived peacefully for several months, she had been suppressing her emotions. Now, she finally felt her mood brighten. Finally, after half a day, the flames on Qin Shi's body dimmed and finally extinguished completely. For more than half a year, his face, which had been unconscious for a long time, showed a slight fluctuation. After a while, he opened his eyes. Senior Marshal Brother. Tiange's voice was hoarse when she finally saw him. Qin Shi slowly turned his head and saw her at first glance, but he didn't say anything. He just gently reached out his hand and held it. Tiange's eyes were slightly wet. She smiled, closed her eyes, and gently leaned her cheek on his hand, feeling this long-lost warmth. The silent warmth did not last long. After a series of cracking sounds, it turned out that it had jumped onto the tea table and swept the parts of the dolls to the ground. Then, it waved its tail and pointed its butt at them to show its dissatisfaction. Tiange couldn't help but laugh. She blinked away the tears at the corners of her eyes. From beginning to end, Fei Fei didn't like Qin Shi very much. Perhaps it was because of the pride of a divine beast that it had no choice but to recognize her as its master. Qin Shi obviously had nothing to do with it, but it still had to put up with it. She also smiled. After regaining his consciousness and lying down for a while, he had already regained some of his spirit. Now that he sat up and slightly stretched his muscles and bones, he unexpectedly discovered that he was full of strength. He was a little surprised. Looking inside himself, he found that his dantian and meridians were very different from before. Even his body had become much tougher. Stretching out his hand, he seemed to have something more than usual. It was filled with vigor. Then, he raised his head and looked around. He found that he was still in the Vermilion Bird main hall, but the layout of the surroundings seemed to be a temporary residence. What's going on? She was puzzled. He remembered that he was swallowed by the Vermilion Bird's breath. His meridians and dantian had to bear the Vermilion Bird's divine power. This kind of power was too strong. He thought he couldn't hold it anymore, and then he lost consciousness. Unexpectedly, when he woke up, he was still fine, even better than before. Tiange was also fine. They were still in the Vermilion Bird main hall. No, the time when the passage to the Immortal Palace closed was already very close. Why were they still here? Tiange, is the passage closed? He asked with a serious expression. Shi's question caught the key point. Tiange nodded and said carelessly, "You've been in a coma for more than half a year. The passage to the Immortal Palace has long been closed." Really? She was only a little stunned when he heard this news. He was neither shocked nor panicked. Then he sighed softly. He was very clear about the situation before he was in a coma. It was already difficult for them to keep their lives with Jing Xingji alone. It was almost impossible for them to get out of the passage. Compared with their lives, what was the big deal about being locked in the Immortal Palace? If they were alive, they would have hope. He wasn't a disciple of a famous school who hadn't experienced setbacks. Although there weren't many obstacles in cultivating to the nascent soul realm, he had experienced a lot of hardships. His mental state had long been cultivated to the point of being indomitable. These thoughts flashed through his mind. His gaze fell on Tiange. He asked with concern, "How have you been in the past half a year? Did they make things difficult for you? What happened after that? What's wrong with me? You'll know just by looking at me." Tiange smiled. As for what happened in the past half a year, Tiange spent some time telling him everything that happened after he was in a coma. Julian Sek's hopes were dashed. Master Daoist Iron Mask had no choice but to leave. Jing Xingji was implicated and injured. Guifeng Devil Monarch died. Yang Qingji practiced the primordial devil technique, and finally, she told him about how he subdued the Vermilion Bird Bao due to the Yang spiritual bead and how his body was transformed. I see. She suddenly understood. No wonder I found myself different from before as soon as I woke up. Oh. Tiange's eyes sparkled. Did you make a realm breakthrough? Upon seeing her expectant gaze, she couldn't help but laugh. How could it be that easy? If I make a realm breakthrough, I'll be in the late stage of the nascent soul realm. However, in order to cross the South Sea that year, I forcibly increased my cultivation level and made a realm breakthrough, so my foundation was a bit shaky. I also got injured while crossing the South Sea. Although my cultivation level is still there are hidden dangers in my body. Just now, I discovered that my dantian is full, my meridians are strong, and even my body has become incomparably sturdy. Not only are the hidden dangers gone, but even my spiritual aura is also a lot more solid. Upon hearing this, Tiange felt relieved. That's good. I was worried there would be some sequelae, but now, your previous big problem has been solved. Not bad. She was also very relaxed. I originally thought the injuries I suffered in the South Sea would take many years to recover, but now, it's a blessing in disguise. What about the Vermilion Bird Bao? Since there were no problems with other things, Mo Tiange asked about this. Fei Fei said the Yang spiritual bead has already assimilated the vermilion bird's breath, so the vermilion bird Bao also recognized you as its master. Do you feel anything? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tried to use his spiritual aura to approach the Yang spiritual bead inside his dantian. He knew the vermilion bird Bao was inside the Yang spiritual bead. Ever since he took the Yang spiritual bead as his own, this bead had been continuously transforming his physique. However, due to the limitations of his cultivation level, the amount of spiritual aura he could use inside the Yang spiritual bead was still very little. Half a day later, Shi shook his head. I can sense the vermilion bird Bao, but I can't pull it out of the Yang spiritual bead. I think it's probably because I haven't assimilated it enough. Although the Yang spiritual bead has already fused with me, the spiritual aura it contains is too much, it's not something I can use right now. It was the Yang spiritual bead that subdued the vermilion bird Bao, not me. No matter which one it is, both of them are too powerful. If I want to control them, I have to slowly tame them. Even if a powerful treasure was subdued, it still wasn't easy to use it. Mo Tiange also understood this, so she didn't ask any more questions. In any case, he woke up, and it was a blessing in disguise. This was a good thing. The vermilion bird Bao wasn't within her expectations. Fu Yaozi didn't tell her about the vermilion bird Bao in the beginning because he obviously knew it was impossible for them to obtain the vermilion bird Bao with their cultivation levels. Now that the vermilion bird Bao was subdued by Shi by accident, it was already a pleasant surprise. She couldn't use it for the time being, but she didn't need to worry too much. Shi seemed to understand what she was thinking. He reached out, pulled her into his arms, and said softly, "You've worked hard for more than half a year." During this time, although she didn't need to use her magical power or her wits, she was trapped in the dark underground palace with little hope. She didn't know the future, but she also had to worry about his injuries and plot a way to get out. If she didn't have a firm will, all these things together would be enough to crush her. At her side, there was only Jing Xingji, who seemed like a friend but wasn't very reliable, and a proud and awkward spiritual beast. There was no one to share her burden. Mo Tiange also hugged his waist. Feeling each other's body temperature intertwining, her nerves, which had been tense for more than half a year, suddenly relaxed. She closed her eyes and murmured, "Didn't work hard at all, none of this was a big deal." As long as there was hope in her heart, these psychological torments were nothing. She was no longer the orphan girl who had lost her parents, nor was she a little cultivator who was not steady enough and often made mistakes. She had a strong heart and a firm will. When he had an accident, she could stand up and bear everything. The two of them were affectionate when they suddenly heard a voice. "Ha! You're awake." Jing Xingji had come back. Mo Tiange and Shi separated. Their attitudes were very natural, and they didn't feel embarrassed, they didn't do anything. Shi glanced at him and said, "I didn't expect you to still be alive." His tone was very flat as if he was just stating a fact. But because of his flat tone, Jing Xingji was very unhappy. "Why can't I be alive?" "You're still alive." This Qin Shoujing really looked down on him out of habit. "Aren't you?" An early-stage nascent soul cultivator dared to enter the Immortal Palace. You're already very brave, and you even fought against a late-stage nascent soul cultivator. It's really a miracle that you're still alive now. Humph. If you were in my position, do you dare to say you wouldn't do that? Jing Xingji wasn't polite at all. You're only in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm, but you dared to take your little lover and deal with a bunch of late-stage nascent soul cultivators. You're no less courageous than me. Also, if you weren't lucky enough to run into me, you too would have been killed already. What he said wasn't a lie. When Qin was unconscious after receiving the vermilion bird's breath, if Jing Xingji hadn't been by his side, Master Daoist Iron Mask definitely wouldn't have let them go. But Qin ignored the main point of Jing Xingji's words and only said, "Tiange isn't my little lover, she's my Dao companion." Jing Xingji held back for a long time. "Qin Shoujing, you..." Qin smiled then suddenly said, "Thank you very much. Although I really don't believe this is something you'd do." Jing Xingji was speechless. He even had to say thank you to provoke him. "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."